Chapter 154. After speaking, Chi Juoyu realized that he had overreacted. He hurriedly covered it up with a smile and added, "What I meant to say was that a servant in the residence had been scolded by me previously." In a moment of indignation, he faked a wolf's paw print in my room in order to frighten me as revenge. Later, it somehow spread outside and through the storyteller's mouth. The more it spread, the more outrageous it became. There were really people who believed it. Little eunuch, please be sure to tell His Highness that there has never been a wolf demon, let alone the so-called ominous. His Highness, please don't listen to others' slander. So that's how it is. This servant will save it. Chi Juoyu forced a smile and gathered a strand of loose hair on her temples. I was indeed shocked today. I feel a little unwell, and want to rest for a while. If there is nothing else, little eunuch, please go first. Ningxu raised her head and glanced at Chi Juonyu's flickering eyes. If it is really as you said, then why did you look so flustered just now? What is the blue mark that has accumulated over a long time? What is it that made you so afraid that you can't sleep and toss and turn? However, Ningxu knew that since Chi Juonyu didn't want to say it, no matter how many times she asked, she wouldn't get an answer. Therefore Ningxu bowed, left the box, and turned to leave. Before she left, Mama Hui gave her an ingot of gold, which implied that good things come in pairs. Ningxu weighed the heavy weight in her palm and clicked her tongue. It was at least 10 taels. This was an unexpected surprise. She didn't run for nothing. Ningxu walked down the ochre wooden ladder, and vaguely heard a few whispers between Chi Juonyu and Mama Hui from upstairs. Mama Hui, do you think that this place is so secure, then that thing can't chase after us? That's natural. This is the Imperial Palace, guarded by the Imperial Qi. That monster won't dare to act rashly. There are also more than 100 guards sent by concubine Qi to protect Miss here. It is 100 times safer than outside. Miss, you can rest assured. In addition, this old servant will always be with Mississippi. Even if someone really wants to harm you, this old servant will be the first to block in front of you. Then I'm relieved. Mother Hui, I have a headache. I'm going to lie down for a while. Don't call me for dinner, I don't have much of an appetite. Keep a close eye on the rewards from the concubines in the palace. Get someone to pack it up, and send it back to the manor. You must not damage it, otherwise it will be a great crime. This is a small matter. Leave it to me. Ningxu deliberately slowed down her pace. Finally, she heard the sound of Mother Hui helping Chi Juoyu into the room to rest. Then she fell silent. While caressing the 2 gold ingots in her hands, she pondered what the thing that Chi Juonyu was so afraid of was. Monster. Could it be that there really was such a wolf demon? Walking out of the fragrant hall, Ningxu raised her head outside the hall, and looked at the towering palace that was 30 or 40 feet high in front of her. It was surrounded by dense palace walls and a whole circle of guards. She thought that if someone really wanted to break in and harm Chi Juonyu, he would have to grow wings. Thinking of this, Ningxu turned around and rushed back to the agreed place with Xiaoqing. But she didn't expect that before Xiaoqing arrived, she saw Huema, who looked nervous first. Seeing her from a distance, Huema immediately rushed to her. What's wrong? Ningxu asked. Huema's face was green. He swallowed hard and said, Xinxing is dead. What? Ningxu was slightly shocked. She hurriedly restrained herself and said, What's the matter? Take me there quickly. It's my fault. I was careless. Standing in front of Xinxing's body, Huema gritted his teeth and said guiltily, Not long after I disguised myself and sneaked into the palace of old Princess Su, I found that she committed suicide. It must be that when I investigated her before, I was not too careful and leaked the information. She knew it. Before taking the order, young master told me to be careful, and not to let her commit suicide after she found out. But I'm so useless. Chapter 155. If a person wants to commit suicide, there are 1,000 ways. You can't guard against it. Before she acted today, I'm afraid that she had already planned to be exposed and arranged for her funeral. You're not to blame for this. Ningxu bent over and looked at the woman lying flat on the couch. This woman had spent most of her life bowing and nodding in the palace. She was wearing a set of clothes that she didn't believe but were very neatly starched. Her hands were peacefully placed on her chest, and every strand of her hair was neatly combed. Her face showed a kind of blue after being poisoned, but her expression was extraordinarily calm. There was even a slight smile on her lips, as if she had finally fulfilled her wish of many years. She was satisfied with peace of mind. What happened before she died? Ningxu asked. I asked the palace maids who were with her. They all said that after she came back from the Taiping banquet with the old imperial concubine, she didn't go anywhere. She stayed in her room and didn't talk to anyone. She seemed to be in a good mood, and even hummed a song. Then she said that she was a little sleepy and wanted to take a nap. Then she lay down to rest. After I sneaked in, I waited outside her room for a while and didn't hear anything. I was a little flustered, so I rushed in and found that she had stopped breathing. Guillermo frowned and said, looking at her face, she should have died of poison. But I just hurriedly checked her throat and stomach, and didn't find any poison. With his words, Ningxu's eyes slowly slid over Xinxing's hands, arms, soles, and other parts of her body. She didn't find any wounds. Finally, her eyes fell on her neatly combed hair and said, pull out that hairpin and see. Guillermo answered and pulled it out. Sure enough, the hairpin was shining with a strange blue-purple color, and there was a touch of blood on it. Ningxu couldn't help but sigh. That means she was prepared to die early. Even if we caught her one step ahead, we couldn't stop her. Every day, countless people quietly disappeared into ponds, wells, and corners of the cold palace in this crowded imperial palace, which was home to tens of thousands of people. Xinxing's death was nothing. It was just that the only exposed clue at present was broken. Guillermo sighed as he sealed up Xinxing's body and all her belongings. He was going to take them back to the palace, and continue to check them one by one to see if he could find anything. He thought that everything that had happened today was already exhausting enough, but he didn't expect that something even bigger and more bizarre had yet to happen, and was quietly waiting for it to suddenly break through the ground before the arrival of the next day, causing everyone to be in fear and trepidation, and stupefied. Qi Juanyu had been captured by the wolf demon. No one would have thought that in the pavilion of the royal palace, under the heavy security that not even a mosquito could get in front of 150 palace guards, as well as her own maidservants, she disappeared without a trace in this starless and moonless night. Only a red dress she wore during the day floated down slowly from the second floor of the palace, as high as 40 feet like a ghost after a scream. It rolled a few times in the wind, and fell on the grass beside the pavilion. It was covered with bloody wolf paw prints. Ningxu had just laid down, and was about to fall asleep when someone knocked on the door. She jolted awake from her half-asleep state. She had a splitting headache and was in a bad mood. Then she heard the news. She opened her eyes and woke up at once. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the palace gate opened wide. Ningxu entered the palace in the carriage of Prince Namping's mansion with morning dew on her body. Then she squatted on the ground and looked at the silk dress full of wolf paw prints. She sighed silently with her face in her hands. She had a premonition that the days without day and night would come back in the next period of time. It was a pity that her beautiful face couldn't endure for long. She was afraid that she would become a haggard old woman in advance. What a waste of God's gift. Beside her, Qi Juanyu's maidservants were sobbing. Mother Hui was even out of breath from crying. Even concubine Qi, who hurried over after hearing the news, couldn't help but turn pale. She said in shock, How could this be? Another maidservant was also scared pale. She looked at the silk dress in front of Ningxu in horror. It must be that monster that took Miss away. It must be. That monster is back. It's back for revenge. What should we do? I'm afraid that Miss is in danger. Hearing this, Ningxu had an idea. She got up and walked to the maidservant's side. She said softly, May I ask what the monster you're talking about is? Shut up. Don't talk nonsense. Mother Hui rushed over and wanted to cover the maidservant's mouth, but it was too late. The maidservant had already blurted out, A wolf demon. When Miss was 7 years old, she killed it. Chapter 156. Ningxu blinked curiously at the maidservant's words. There really was a wolf demon. This was really strange. Before the maidservant could continue, Mother Hui reprimanded her in a low voice. Xiangjin, be quiet. Have you forgotten Mrs. Instructions? The maidservant named Xiangjin's lips seemed to be glued together. She didn't dare to continue, and the others didn't dare to interrupt either. Ning Shu watched the undercurrent between the Qi family's servants. She raised her eyebrows and smiled. She straightened out the non-existent creases on her robe and slowly said, "Is your young Mrs.'s advice more important? Or is her life more important? At this point, your Mrs.'s life is in danger at any time. If you still don't want to tell us the truth and block her last chance to live, then don't blame my Namping mansion for not caring about it." She finished speaking coldly and turned to leave. Behind her, Imperial concubine Qi's expression was tense. If the Namping mansion really ignored it, didn't that mean that this marriage alliance might also fall through? Thinking of this, Imperial concubine Qi frowned and said coldly, "What's the matter with that wolf demon? Hurry up and tell us the truth." Ningxu stopped in her tracks. Since Imperial concubine Qi had spoken, the maidservants couldn't hide it anymore. The maidservant named Xiangjin knelt on the ground and reported truthfully. Reporting to everyone, "It's like this. 9 years ago, when my miss was 7 years old, she went out to play and happened to meet a vaudeville troupe. She saw a strange beast in the troupe. It looked very strange, and was about the size of an 8 or 9-year-old child. It was covered in spikes and wolf fur. It looked a bit like a wolf, but not completely like one. It seemed like a century-old wolf demon that had cultivated into a spirit. That monster was very smart. Not only could it understand the human language, but it could also write a few simple words. The words it wrote were all auspicious words that made people happy. My miss was young at that time and took a fancy to it at first sight. She teased it for a while." Ningxu asked, "What kind of teasing?" "Nothing more than making it kneel and kowtow. That monster was very obedient and did all of it. The young miss was very happy and wanted to ride on its body. She wanted to try out the story of riding a monster and soaring into the sky. However, she didn't expect that after riding on the monster for a few steps, the monster's strength would be exhausted. Its knees went soft, causing my young miss to fall heavily to the ground. A large chunk of her chin was knocked out. My family's young mistress was so angry that she cried loudly. She was afraid that she would be disfigured, so..." Ningxu asked again, "So what? You killed it?" Shuddering, Xiangjin swallowed and said with difficulty, "Yes. Miss was so angry that she ordered a few servants to put the monster into a sack and beat it to death with an iron rod." The monster knelt on the ground and trembled. It slammed its forehead on the ground, and kowtowed to Qi Juanyu to admit its mistake. However, Qi Juanyu's heart was not softened even after dozens of begging. She waved her small hand, and the servants behind her caught the monster, and put it into the sack. The maidservant could still recall the bloody scene at that time. The iron rod had only swung down a dozen times, and bright red blood had seeped out of the dirty sack. The thing in the sack had constantly dodged and twitched, but where could it escape to? Miserable howls kept coming out of the sack. Woo 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 woo. It was like a child who did not know how to speak yet. It was doing its best to beg for mercy. However, it did not expect that Qi Juanyu was so angry. The more sorrowful its cries were, the happier Qi Juanyu would be, and she would beat it harder. Not long after, the thing in the sack let out a final humming sound and stopped moving. She was the one who took the initiative to tease the monster. Later, she fell from the monster's back and got injured. However, she took out her anger on the monster and destroyed a creature. Ningxu did not agree with this. She frowned unhappily. "And then? What did your miss do with the monster?" Xiangjin's voice was even softer. "After killing it, Miss did not take it to heart. She casually threw a silver ingot to the juggler and left. The carriage dragged the bloody sack along the street for an entire journey. Only then did Miss completely calm down. She ordered the servants to throw the sack on the side of the road, and took us back to the residence." Her voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzz. When the maidservant finished her story, the surrounding people did not know how to react. They only felt their hair stand on end. Ningxu finally understood. She had done such a cruel thing at such a young age. No wonder Qi Zhanyu had never dared to speak of it. Anyone who heard it would think that she was cruel, bloodthirsty, and repulsive, let alone continue to be her future princess consort. Chapter 157. A living person disappeared just like that without leaving any traces behind. Could it be that it was really done by the wolf demon? Immediately, there were rustling sounds of discussion in the surroundings. That's too scary. It can speak human language and write. If it's not a demon, then what is it? There are so many bloody paw prints. That thing must have died with grievances, and came back to take revenge on fourth young miss. What nonsense! Consort Chi raised her eyebrows and immediately interrupted these sensational speculations. This is the Imperial Palace. With His Majesty's golden dragon guarding it, even a wolf demon wouldn't be able to barge in. That wolf demon has been dead for 9 years. Why didn't it take revenge earlier or later? Why did it have to wait until now? I don't believe it. There must be something fishy going on. Mother Hui, you tell me. When did you notice Zhuiyu's disappearance? Also, what happened before she disappeared? Who did she come into contact with? Mother Hui hurriedly wiped her tears and said intermittently, "Young Miss hasn't been sleeping well recently. She couldn't sleep when she heard the slightest sound. Thus, she ordered us not to get too close, and just to guard outside the hall." This old servant was not at ease, but after thinking about it, there were so many guards around, and this 2-story pavilion was 4 zhang high. Even an expert with Qinggong wouldn't be able to fly in. Young Miss shouldn't have any problems, so we obeyed. When I helped young Miss into the room, it was around 5 p.m. After that, I came out to do some work. Around 6 p.m., we suddenly heard a sound coming from the room. We were startled and rushed into the room. In the end, we saw that the bed where young Miss was originally lying on was empty. When we looked again, the tightly shut window was now wide open. Young Miss's red dress slowly floated down from the window. And young Miss, we couldn't find her anymore. As for who she came into contact with, before the incident, old consort you came and asked if young Miss was well on behalf of the 13th princess. At that time, I told her that young Miss was already asleep. I'm afraid that it would be inconvenient for her to meet. But I didn't expect that old consort you would insist on meeting her. She even pushed the door open to take a look. When she saw that young Miss was indeed asleep, she didn't have the nerve to disturb her. She withdrew and said that she would leave first today and come back tomorrow. She even ordered us to pass on her good intentions to young Mississippi old consort you? Ning Shu repeated this name in her mind and asked, "What time is it?" Mother Hui pondered for a moment and couldn't remember. Xiang Jin, on the other hand, remembered, "It's 9:15. At that time, I was wondering why old Princess Consort you was coming so late at night. Therefore, when I went downstairs to welcome you, I curiously looked at the hourglass." Ning Shu thought for a moment. "Then how did old Princess Consort you come and leave? Did you take anything with you when you left?" "I think they came in a palanquin. When they came, they brought some medicinal herbs and tonics to calm the mind. When they left, they didn't take anything with them." After that, he asked a few more questions, but he didn't get any more valuable information. Imperial concubine Qi ordered the imperial bodyguards to immediately search the entire fragrant palace hall inch by inch. She didn't believe that there really was a demon with wings that could fly in and take her away. After Cao Ho and His Majesty heard about it, they sent another 300 guards to assist. However, nearly 500 people had turned this fragrant palace hall, which was neither too big nor too small, upside down. Even the roots of every blade of grass were peeled off, for fear of any hidden suspense. Ning Shu followed the imperial bodyguards, crouching, crawling, or standing on ladders. She wanted to knock down every brick and search every corner to find a secret passage or mechanism that could hide someone. Unfortunately, she didn't find anything. In the novel, Liang Shambua and Zhu Yingtai turned into butterflies and flew away hand in hand. Could it be that the 4th young miss of the Qi family had also followed in their footsteps? Chapter 158. Ning Shu stood in Qi Zhuanyu's room and watched for a long time. Her mind slowly simulated all the possible scenes that could have happened last night. Then, step by step, she walked down the ochre-colored stairs and returned to the blood-stained silk dress on the ground. She squatted for a long time without saying a word. Only when the candlelight gradually weakened and the sky brightened did she feel cold all over. A cloak fell from her head to her face, covering her completely. Ningshu didn't even need to think to know who had come. Pulling herself out of the cloak, Ningshu maintained her squatting position and raised her head. This angle made Xiaoqing appear abnormally tall. She said, "Even if a stone fell into the water, there should be some sound. But Qi Zhuanyu, a living person, actually disappeared without a sound in this impregnable palace. Doesn't your highness think this is ridiculous?" "Ridiculous," Xiaoqing indifferently replied, which counted as a show of support. On the side, seeing the heir apparent toss his cloak to Lady Ning, Josie hurriedly put on the other cloak in her hands for Xiaoqing. And then? She blinked. That's it. Then Xiaoqing lightly kicked her foot and said, "Let's go." "What was the meaning of this?" Ningshu asked. "What are we going to do?" With Josie's support, Xiaoqing turned and walked away. "Go back and rest." Ningshu hesitated and stood up. "But fourth young Miss Qi, she's already lost. Can you find her in a short time?" Xiaoqing's voice was as low as water in the glow, leisurely and carefree. "I can't." Ningshu shook her head. The other party's plan was far-reaching and dared to make such a big move. It was impossible for them to find her quickly. "But isn't your highness worried? After all, she is your princess consort. If he really is cursed by the 8 characters and dies an unnatural death in the end, then it would really disappoint fourth Miss Qi's deep feelings of coming to participate in the heir consort selection, even though she knew it was dangerous." She quickened her pace to catch up with him to see Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing said in a flat tone, "The premise of her unnatural death is that she must first become insane, so she shouldn't die in a short time, right?" Ningshu was instantly flabbergasted. Although what he said was quite reasonable, in any case, his heir's consort had gone missing. What kind of person was he to have such a reaction? "But she is, after all, the heir consort you have chosen." Ningshu was speechless. Xiaoqing sneered coldly, "You're wrong. This Shitzi Fei was not chosen by me, nor was it chosen by the heavens. It was pushed to me by the person behind the scenes. Why should I be flustered as he wishes?" That seemed to be right. The other party's actions were undoubtedly to make them flustered, so that they could watch from the sidelines. Then they might as well do the opposite and go against the other party's wishes. However, his tone was too flat. It was so calm that it was as if he was casually mentioning the grass that he had just stepped on, the wind that he had just encountered, or the falling flowers that he had brushed past. There was no hatred, no resentment, no disgust, and no worry. There was no fluctuation in his tone, but it was even more ruthless. Ningshu silently followed behind him. After a moment of silence, she said, "For your highness, does it not matter who you choose to be the heir consort?" Ningshu lowered her head as she spoke, so she was caught off guard and suddenly bumped into his back. Ningshu hurriedly covered her forehead and took a step back, afraid that she would break this noble master. Xiaoqing's footsteps stopped, and he slightly turned his face to the back. He said with a complicated tone, "What do you think?" Note 1, Shiwu, another name for the sun. Chapter 159. I'm not a roundworm in your stomach. How would I know? Ningshu muttered softly. Noticing that his brows were slightly furrowed, the alarm bells in her heart rang. She hurriedly tried to make up for it by putting on a smiling face. What my daughter means is, your highness has mountains and seas in your heart, clouds and the blue dome of heaven in your heart. My daughter's aptitude is so dull. Even if she cracked her skull, she wouldn't be able to guess your highness' thoughts. Seeing that Xiaoqing's frown did not loosen and he continued to remain silent, Ningshu thought for a moment before continuing. Moreover, in my heart, your highness is so handsome, like a celestial in a painting. Not to mention noble ladies and princesses. Even the Jiutian goddess would not be worthy of a single hair on your highness's head. Xiaoqing still did not speak, but his expression darkened even more. The more she said, the uglier his expression became. Instinctively, she felt that if she continued, she would be finished. Ningshu hurriedly lowered her head and apologized. My daughter boldly made a joke about your highness. Please forgive me. Hearing her deliberately pretending to be obedient, but in fact heartless voice, Xiaoho lightly curled his lips into a cold smile. The black brocade covering his eyes fluttered in the wind. He lifted his feet and no longer waited for her. Yes, you don't know anything. You only know how to joke. Ningxu did not know which sentence had offended this beautiful prince made of ice. She wailed in her heart. She could only seal her mouth and obediently follow behind without saying anything. She suddenly remembered the 13th princess's words. In Xiao Zhongping's heart, this person had the same gentle gaze as her mother. It was unforgettable for her. Why was it that when facing her, Ningxu, they either strangled her to threaten her or ridicule her? It was like two different faces. Thinking of this, a strange feeling suddenly floated through her heart. It swam through her heart like a fish tail. Before she could detect it, the transparent fish tail swayed and quickly swam away. Because just as she reached the gate of heaven influence, she saw old Princess Consort use carriage coming from afar. Ningxu's heart skipped a beat. She took a few steps forward and whispered a few words to Xiaohoqing. After getting Xiaohoqing's approval, she called a few people to help put on a show. The coachman of Prince Yu's residence was a meticulous and cautious old man. He always drove the carriage smoothly and steadily, so that the old Princess Consort wouldn't be shaken at all. Thus, he was deeply trusted by the old Princess Consort. Today he drove the carriage slowly as usual, preparing to leave the gate of heaven influence and return to the Wang mansion. Unexpectedly, the gentle old horse in front of him suddenly slipped and let out a panicked neigh. Then the wheels of the carriage jolted a few times, which made him turn pale with fright. Inside the carriage, old Princess Yu cried out in alarm. The coachman hurriedly lashed the whip, but the horse was completely frightened. Just as the carriage was about to go out of control, a few figures suddenly dashed out and hugged the horse tightly, stabilizing its hooves. Two more people then grabbed the wheels on both sides, and only then did Kuanglan stop. Inside the carriage, old Princess Yu was still in a state of shock. What's going on? The coachman hurriedly jumped off the carriage and found a few round pebbles on the ground. Your Highness, the horse accidentally stepped on the pebbles on the road and was momentarily startled. Fortunately, there were a few eunuchs to help. On the side, after trying their best to stabilize the carriage, a few eunuchs wiped the sweat off their foreheads and bowed towards the inside of the carriage. This servant pays respects to your Highness. A corner of the carriage's curtain was lifted. Inside the carriage, old Princess Yu let out a few intermittent coughs and sighed. Which palace are you from? I really have to thank all of you this time. Reporting to your Highness, this servant is in charge of cleaning near the gate of heaven influence. We can't bear your Highness's greeting. There were a few pebbles here, and we didn't clean them up in time. Please forgive us, your Highness. What are you talking about? If it weren't for your timely appearance, I'm afraid that I would have met the old prince directly today. As old Princess Yu spoke, her coughs became even more severe. The leader of the eunuchs said worriedly, Your Highness, are you frightened? This servant will invite an imperial physician for you right now. It was Ningxu who had her head lowered. Old Princess Yu let out a long sigh. This old one is indeed frightened, but it's not because of this matter. It's because the Qi family's fourth young miss disappeared from the palace without any reason, leaving behind only a piece of clothing with a bloody claw print. This is truly shocking. I clearly saw that lass with my own eyes before this incident happened. Who would have thought? Let's not talk about it anymore. Just thinking about it makes me scared. I'm already old and useless. I know that I can't help with this matter, so I didn't want to cause trouble for His Majesty and the imperial concubines in the palace. That's why I quickly left the palace. The eunuchs listened quietly, not daring to speak. When old Princess Yu finished sighing and ordered the coachman to continue, Ningxu hurriedly said, Your Highness, these pebbles are too slippery and annoying. Just now, a few of them were kicked away by the horses. If they accidentally rolled into the wheel of the carriage, there might be more trouble in the future. Why don't your Highness wait for a moment, and let this servant make sure that there aren't any mistakes before inviting your Highness back to the residence? Old Princess Yu thought for a moment and said, Then I'll have to trouble these young gentlemen. Ningxu and the others said in fear and trepidation, This servant is doing his duty. Ningshu waved her hand and led the others to quickly check the carriage. They carefully looked at every gap in the carriage and secretly pressed on the bottom of the carriage. Then they all retreated to the side of the road and bowed as they watched Prince Yu's carriage leave. Chapter 160. There was only old Princess Consort Yu and her mama in the carriage. I didn't see anyone else. I secretly peeked through the curtains and didn't see anything like a wooden box that could hide someone. In addition, the bottom of the carriage was very thin and didn't look like it could hide a living person. Ningshu only climbed into Xiaoqing's carriage after Prince Yu's carriage was far away. Originally, she had her suspicions. After all, old Princess Consort Yu was the last person to see Qi Zhanyu. Moreover, the time of her visit last night was too strange. At that time, the sky was already dark. Visiting at such a late time, although it was said to be out of concern, it seemed to be intentional. Therefore, she had just led people to put on a show. However, after the investigation just now, it seemed that this suspicion couldn't be established. Ningshu couldn't help but sigh. However, she was already prepared. If she could find out so easily, it would be a waste of the other party's plan. Only, Ningshu raised her face and looked at Xiaoqing, who was only a small table across from her. Her voice was like a kingfisher. I still have some doubts in my heart. Old Princess Consort Yu went to visit Qi Zhanyu so late at night, and left without saying a word. Was it really just a sudden impulse? There's no need to rush. Whether it was a sudden impulse or deliberate, we can slowly investigate. Xiaoqing clenched his fists and coughed softly. Ningshu looked carefully and found that his jade-white face showed fatigue. It seemed that he didn't sleep well last night. Thus she said, Your Highness stayed in His Majesty's palace last night. Was it because of 4th Miss Chi's case? She waited at the palace gates last night, and didn't wait for him until the key to the harem was released. She only waited until Jissi came to tell her that he would accompany her tonight, and asked her to go back and rest first. Then, she left the palace with the Qi estate's carriage. Xiaoqing took a sip of the tea that Jissi poured and handed to him. His tone was casual as he said, This case is just one of the many. It's not a big deal. Ningshu was speechless. Then there's something even bigger? Xiaoqing said. Southern Yan sent an envoy to ask for the princess's hand in marriage. Ningshu nodded. She had heard about it. This was also the reason why the 13th princess disregarded the ancestral rules and barged into the peace banquet. Xiaoqing coldly raised the corner of his mouth and tapped on the small table with his knuckles, making a crisp sound. The dowry they want is 10 cities. Ningshu was stunned. How arrogant. However, after a brief moment of indignation, she also sighed in understanding. Although this was unexpected, it was also reasonable. His Majesty was a conservative person. Although he had wielded a sword while riding a horse when he was young, he had only led a few small battles. After he ascended to the throne, he deeply understood the principle that the son of a rich family should not sit under the awning and never held a sword again. Since the previous dynasty, the Great Yu dynasty had placed more importance on civil affairs than military affairs, causing the border countries to become restless and even provoke them. Under the seemingly rich appearance, there were actually deep worries. 11 years ago, the invasion of the Han dynasty was an example. Fortunately, at that time, Xiaoqing offered advice to resolve the crisis. Ningshu was very curious. Southern Yan was provoking them this time. What method could Xiaoqing come up with to resolve it? Then, Your Majesty, do you plan to marry them? She asked tentatively. Yes. Ningshu frowned. Then what about the cities? Xiaoqing still said one word. Give them away. Ningshu's frown deepened, almost forming a knot. Today 10 cities would be taken away. Tomorrow it would be 100 cities. Following that, the entire Great Yu dynasty might be forcefully taken by the other side. Therefore, once this was done, only 4 words would await the Great Yu dynasty: eternal damnation. However, if they refused to cede the cities, it would give the other side a reason to start a war. In this kind of situation, whether they gave or not, it was not a good idea. It was really hard to get off the tiger. Just as she was worrying, She heard Xiaoqing continue to speak as if he was taking a stroll. However, it is not Southern Yan but Beisun. 3 years of taxes from 10 cities will be given to Beisun. Wait for their cavalry to cross the desert and come to Yangqing Pass to take it personally. Ha! Ningxu was stunned for a moment, but she immediately reacted. Beisun and Southern Yan were originally one country, but after internal strife, they had never stopped fighting. However, Beisun was located in the desert and was not as rich as Southern Yan. Therefore, they had been at a disadvantage for many years. Furthermore, the people of Beisun had been suffering in poverty for many years, training them to not care about their lives. 3 years of taxes from 10 cities was a drop in the ocean for the Great Yu dynasty, but the people of Beisun were willing to risk their lives for it. Yangguan City and Southern Yan bordered each other. If Beisun wanted the money, they would have to invade Southern Yan territory. The War of 10 Cities and the feud between the two countries would definitely cause chaos. The Great Yu dynasty could naturally find a chance to breathe, and then make a deeper plan, raising a wild leopard and letting it fight with a tiger. It had to be said that this move was really harmful. Of course, Ningxu did not dare to say this out loud. She clasped her hands together and slowly bowed towards him. She was convinced and said, "Your Highness has a great plan." Chapter 161. Ningxu suddenly thought that if Xiaoqing was born in the imperial family, Xiao Yuni and the others might not have a place in the imperial family. However, their fates were already set. It might be a good thing that they didn't have to step on the imperial family's bottomless quagmire. Xiaoqing scoffed softly, his lips curling up. "Aren't you thinking of harming others to benefit yourself?" Ah, how did he see through it? Although it was easy to talk to smart people, it was really stressful to be too smart. Ningxu smiled embarrassedly, her eyes blinking as she showed her sincerity. "How could that be? My daughter's admiration for your highness can be seen by the sun and the moon, the heavens and the earth." She looked as if she wanted to swear an oath and show him her sincerity. Listening to her obedient and fawning voice, like the dewdrop in the middle of a new lotus in early summer, soft and dripping, Xiaoqing's throat was dry and he suddenly felt thirsty. He picked up the teacup and took another sip to hide it. After a while he continued, "Tell me what you've found so far." When they got to the point, Ningxu immediately became serious. "When your highness was discussing state affairs with his majesty, I went to ask about Qi Zhuanyu's situation before she went missing. According to the Qi family's servants, she went into her room to rest yesterday and didn't come out after that. Old Princess Yu was the last person to see Qi Zhuanyu, and it was 9:15. This was confirmed by several servants, so it shouldn't be wrong. Later, at 11:15, Mama Hui and the others rushed in after hearing the commotion, but she had already disappeared. According to the current time, Qi Zhuanyu should have disappeared between 9:15 and 11:15. Then the key was released at 5:15, and the palace gates opened at 3:15 the next day. Therefore, if Qi Zhuanyu was kidnapped, she must have been hidden somewhere and could only be taken out of the palace after the palace gates opened. After all, there are many guards in the palace, and it's not a good idea to hide in the palace. Therefore, when she saw that old Princess Consort Yu's carriage was about to leave the palace, she had an idea. Xiaoqing listened quietly and nodded. "You don't have to worry about this. After hearing that Qi Zhuanyu went missing, I have already asked His Majesty to order the palace guards to strictly check all the carriages leaving the palace, regardless of whether they are noble or commoner." He thought for a moment and then asked, "How is the terrain around Fragrant Hall?" Ningxu dipped her fingertips in water and drew a simple topographic map of the Fragrant Palace Hall. Beside her, Jiuxi stuck his head out to take a look. He realized that the topographic map was really lifelike. It was the kind that could only be understood but not described. There were a few squares and a few circles. Perhaps only Lady Ning knew what she was drawing. He silently glanced at her and tactfully retracted his gaze. He did not interrupt. Ningxu was keenly aware of this. She awkwardly rubbed the tip of her nose and continued to analyze after drawing. She thought, "Fortunately, Xiaoqing can't see. I don't have to embarrass myself in front of him." Let's talk about the topography of Fragrant Palace Hall. Fragrant Palace Hall was originally a converted library. Apart from the main pavilion, it was surrounded by high palace walls. I followed the imperial bodyguards and searched inside and out, but did not find any hidden compartments or secret passages. Qi Zhuanyu's bedroom was located on the second floor. Apart from the servants guarding the door, there was only one window in the hall. It was empty outside the window. Not even the shadow of a tree could be seen. Xia Hoqing muttered to himself for a moment, and then followed her words. So the biggest point of suspicion is when and how did the other party steal Qi Zhuanyu under the noses of so many people? Yes. Ningxu nodded and continued. There is also Shenxing, who committed suicide. Her actions indicate that she most likely participated in this matter to avenge Wen Kairen. But what role does the wolf demon play in this matter? Is it just a diversion that the other party used to cover up their actions after hearing about it? The wolf demon that was killed 9 years ago and the bloody claw marks that began to appear half a month ago. Wen Kairen who was killed by the poisonous beast 6 years ago and Shenxing who committed suicide yesterday. These two seemingly unrelated matters finally intersected with Qi Zhuanyu. It was really confusing. Oh right, there was also the imperial astronomer. The mystery of the blood signature had not been solved yet. A lot of questions were thrown at them as if they were free. Really? Life is full of disasters, one disaster after another. Horizontal scroll. My condolences. Chapter 162. Ningxu jokingly thought. Then she yawned and felt sleepy. Xia Hoqing did not make a sound, and the carriage was comfortably quiet. Ningxu could not help but fall asleep on the small table in front of her. A soft brocade ribbon was gently tickling her face, and the tip of her nose with the breeze outside the window. She subconsciously reached out to catch it. She half opened her eyes and found that she was holding the end of a piece of black satin in her hand. One part of the brocade embroidered with bluegrass was hidden in front of his eyes, while the other part was caught in her palm. In her half-awake state, Ningxu looked at the person in front of her who was like a famous painting. She vaguely whispered, "This case should not be simpler than the Phoenix Terrace case. It might be several times more complicated. If my daughter can successfully solve the case, can I ask for another reward from His Highness?" "What do you want?" he asked. "I want to see His Highness' eyes." Until they got off the carriage and returned to the Duke's estate, Ningxu was stunned. She did not understand why she had made such a request. She did not know where she got the courage to ask Xia Hoqing to take off the black satin for her to see. Why did she feel that it was inexplicably frivolous? Ningxu, although His Highness the Crown Prince is peerlessly handsome, you should know that you can't touch a tiger's butt. That's right, after she offended him, how did he answer? It seemed to be, but. Ningxu sighed and held her forehead. Forget it. Anyway, he should be used to her shamelessness. Let it go with the wind. Quietly entering through the side door, Ningxu avoided a group of laundry maids and prepared to quietly return to her room. Last time, she acted on her own initiative in the Phoenix Terrace case. After the incident, her mother was worried for a few days and was afraid that she would get into trouble. Therefore, before leaving the estate, she specifically asked for Scythia to cover her up and not let her father and mother find out. Unexpectedly, as soon as she stepped into the room, she saw Forsythia winking and glaring at her with a conflicted expression. Gesturing towards the inner room, Ningxu's heart was alarmed. Before she could react, Princess He Xian had already walked out. Princess He Xian sighed. "Sure, did you forget what mother said to you a few days ago?" Ningxu braced herself and stepped forward. She held her mother's hand and said in a soft voice, "There is another case in the palace, which is related to heir of Xiahou. I owe him a big favor before, so I acted recklessly again. Mother, please don't be angry with me. You are my most cherished daughter. How could mother be angry with you? It's just that I've repeatedly told you to stay away from Xia Hoqing. His body." Princess Hexin's words stopped abruptly. "He has a chronic disease and it can flare up at any time. When the time comes, you won't be able to tell, so it's better to keep a distance from him from the beginning, a little farther, a little farther." Although Princess He Xian's pause was extremely fast, It still couldn't escape Ningshu's keen nerves. She carefully understood the meaning of her mother's words. She had a speculation. Does mother also know that Xiaoqing has a strange poison? However, her mother obviously deliberately avoided this topic. She couldn't get any results even if she asked. So Ningshu pursed her lips and smiled. Mother, don't worry. Daughter and heir of Xiahou are only related to the case, nothing else. How can a person like daughter who has been married 3 times get into his eyes? Mother, you think too highly of me. Princess He Xian came over and reached out to comb Ningshu's hair hanging by her ear. She tenderly looked at her most beloved daughter in front of her. From babbling, she gradually grew up to the age she was when she was with Empress Xiaozhou. Then, she grew up to the slender and elegant appearance in front of her. Her heart was filled with thousands of thoughts. Mother doesn't mean that you don't deserve him. My daughter is graceful, beautiful, and intelligent. You are worthy of all the good men in the world. But that man can't be him. Remember, absolutely no. Daughter, do you know why? Ningshu asked carefully. You don't need to know. You only need to know that mother only wants you to be safe and happy, without any disaster or worry. You can live a smooth life. Then, before Ningshu asked, she slowly held Ningshu in her arms and gently patted her back with her soft hands. In a place where Ningshu couldn't see, her eyes were watery like wings. She whispered in a voice that no one could hear. As my daughter, I'm ashamed of you. Chapter 163. Princess He Xian blinked her eyes and quickly recovered her usual warmth. She released her. That's right, the Yin family's young master returned to his hometown a few days ago. Your marriage has also been cancelled. Your father has asked someone to look at a few people. There may be some clues. You should prepare early. A single sentence caused Ningshu's vision to instantly darken. There were only 5 months left until her 17th birthday. Her 3 husbands had failed one after another. Her father was so anxious that he began to think of ways to find a 4th husband for her. It scared all the young masters in the city so much that none of them left their houses. They were afraid that the Duke would take a fancy to them. If that happened, they would have 8 lifetimes of bad luck. Although not long ago, she solved the Phoenix Terrace case in front of 300,000 people, and fiercely made a name for herself. But under her deliberate spread, the common people slowly thought that she had an expert to guide her. Because of this, her reputation as a heavenly cursed star continued to spread. Her first husband died in battle. Her second husband died of illness. Although her 3rd husband was lucky enough to survive, he lost his memory. He was full of poems and amazing literary talent. He had to learn everything from scratch. Heavens, for most people, this was worse than death. So, if you want to keep your life, stay away from Ningshu. These 6 words were hung on the bedside of countless young masters in the capital. Every day when they got up, they would read it before going to bed. They would remember it in their hearts to keep them safe. She thought that her father should have given up. She didn't expect him to still be so tenacious. It really made her cry out in grief. You said before that you would never marry into the imperial family. Your father and I will not force you. Among these people, Prime Minister Tan's son, young Master Tan, I think he is quite good. Although he was a bit unreliable in the past few years, he became more and more decent after entering the Supreme Court. Mother will go to see Mrs. Tan and sound her out. I must find the best home for my baby Shu. Princess He Xian thought about it. She didn't have time to find trouble with Ningshu. She stepped out of the door and prepared to find the Prime Minister's wife to talk about old times. Behind her, Ningshu hurriedly called, Mother! Mother! Princess He Xian's figure was already gone. Ningshu had a headache and held her forehead. In the end, she could only lie on the bed helplessly. Forget it, forget it. Let's take care of the present first. As for the rest, we can only deal with it as it comes. He slept soundly all the way until noon. Ningshu sat in front of the table and tasted the cloud dream chicken and lotus seed tofu that had just been made in the kitchen. They were all dishes that the kitchen maid had just learned and were very suitable for Ningshu. Yin Mengbao, in particular, brushed the tender suckling pig's front thigh with a special honey sauce, then slowly roasted it over the charcoal fire. When it was 60 to 70% dry, she took it down, wrapped it in oil paper, and served it. This kind of food was fresh, sweet, and elastic. It wasn't so dry that it couldn't be chewed. It was just right. If he got tired of it, he could use a cup of lotus seed tofu, and he would instantly feel refreshed. As Ning Shu enjoyed the food, she thought about whether she should start with the imperial astronomer, the wolf demon 9 years ago, or the death of Wen Kairan. An unexpected person came to Duke Ning, interrupting Ning Shu's short period of leisure. May imperial concubine Qi have good fortune and peace. It was an octagonal palanquin. The curtains were airtight. Obviously, they didn't want to be seen by others. In the palanquin, imperial concubine Qi wore a scarlet peony on her head with 3 six-tailed phoenix hairpins. She looked at Ning Shu, who was kneeling and saluting, with a smile that wasn't a smile. Half a month ago, the Empress gave Ruan Qingzhang's case to you. The result was very good. Now, this concubine will also give Zhang Yu's case to you. What do you think? Chapter 164. Replying to imperial concubine Qi. The Phoenix Terrace case was truly due to my luck. Along the way, I accidentally solved it. Now that I've been given an undeserved reputation, I'm truly ashamed to receive it, and I'm even more undeserving of your praise. Ning Shu lowered her head and obediently responded to the gorgeous imperial concubine Qi. Her terrified appearance was exactly like a helpless and mediocre little quail. Luck. Imperial concubine Qi slowly sneered. Then your luck has been good since you were 5 years old. It's really God's blessing. As soon as Ning Shu heard this, she knew that this overbearing imperial concubine Qi was going to bring up old scores. She silently sighed in her heart and braced herself to endure this ancestor's deliberate provocation. Unexpectedly, she suddenly changed the topic and laughed, leaning towards Ning Shu with cold eyes. If the information I received is correct, the person who participated in the case as a little eunuch of Prince Namping's estate these 2 days was you, right? I didn't expect that a girl like you, who doesn't seem to be outstanding, would actually be able to hook up with their Xiahou. Your ability is truly not small. Ning Shu looked at her in astonishment. Imperial concubine You want to ask where this concubine got the information? Imperial concubine Qi lowered her eyes and fiddled with her exquisite pearl armor, leisurely saying, You can guess on your own. This concubine didn't come here today to waste time with you. I only have one thing to tell you. If you want to accept this case, you have to accept it. Not only do you have to accept it for this concubine, but you also have to handle it well for this concubine. In addition, there's one more thing that this concubine wants to remind you. Prince Namping's estate isn't something you can encroach on. It's best if you immediately give up that muddled thought. Otherwise, we'll settle the old and new scores together. After imperial concubine Qi finished her domineering warning, she returned to the palace with her boundless arrogance. Ning Shu didn't even have the chance to refuse. Last time, she had agreed to help the Empress get rid of Consort Nguyen. If she refused imperial concubine Qi this time, she would be standing on the Empress's side and opposing imperial concubine Qi. However, she had already become a thorn in the side of many people in the last case. It wasn't easy for her to keep a low profile for a few days, but now, she was forced to go to Liangshan. He wanted to roast her on the fire, and wouldn't stop until she was cooked. Ning Shu couldn't help but find joy in the midst of bitterness. This is great. I don't have to pretend to be a little eunuch of Lord Ping Nan's mansion anymore. One after another, they warned her to stay away from Xiahou Qing. It was as if she really had some bad intentions towards Xiahou Qing, although she was indeed a little curious about him. Yes, just a little. The Chancellor of the Supreme Court, Feng Zheng, was an old man in his 60s who was ready to retire at any time. Since 10 years ago, he had often been ill. He did not care much about anything and did not offend anyone. He wished that he could turn 70 in the blink of an eye and retire at home. The sentence he said most often was, Aya, what should I do? Thus, after Qi Jiuyu's case was exposed, he fell ill again. After saying, Aya, what should I do? The case was transferred to the Supreme Court's Vice-Chancellor. The Supreme Court's Vice-Chancellor was only in his 20s, and was a very quick-witted person. After receiving orders from the higher-ups to take over this case, he found out that quite a few nobles were involved. That legendary curveball, the eldest daughter of the Ning family, had also been personally selected by Consort Qi. Thus, he spent a large sum of money to reserve the largest private room in the Chasing Clouds and Chasing Moon restaurant, and set up a banquet, so that he could get in touch with the various nobles. When Ning Shu arrived, the vice-chancellor was temporarily held up by miscellaneous matters, and had not yet arrived. Under the guidance of the servant, she pushed open the carved door of the private room. Ning Shu thought that there would be no one inside, and did not expect to see a person standing by the window with his hands behind his back. He was wearing a scarlet cloak and was tall and slender, exuding a faint arrogance. Ning Shu stopped in her tracks and hesitated for a moment. She wondered if she would be too disrespectful if she left at the last minute, because this person was none other than Xiao Yuni, who gave her the most headaches. Chapter 165. Before Ning Shu could retract her footsteps, Xiao Yuni had already turned around. Ning Shu had no choice but to say, "Greetings to your highness." Staring at Ning Shu, who was curtsying to him from 3 to 4 feet away, her attitude respectful but extremely distant, Xiao Yuni smiled, his smile cold and bitter. "Shu, or you're going to completely distance yourself from me." Ning Shu lowered her eyes and answered quietly, "Your highness must be joking. Your highness is the son of the emperor and is a noble, while I'm just an ordinary official's daughter. How would I dare to overstep your boundaries?" Seeing her attitude, Xiao Yuni's expression turned colder and he sneered. "You don't dare to overstep your boundaries towards me, but you dare to do so towards Prince Xiahou?" Sensing Ning Shu's frown, Xiao Yuni suppressed the raging fire in his heart, closed his eyes and took a breath, his tone softening. "I'm just joking with Shu'er. Shu'er, you don't have to take it to heart." Ning Shu paused and said, "Was it your highness who told Consort Qi that I was pretending to be a eunuch in the Lord Pingnan's manor?" The fire that he had been suppressing could no longer be suppressed, and Xiao Yuni laughed coldly. "So what if I did? If I didn't expose this matter, could it be that I would have allowed you to spend time with that blind Xiahou Qing?" Hearing him being so rude, Ning Shu showed a disapproving expression. "Your highness, why do you have to be so vicious with your words? Are you trying to say that I'm vicious?" Xiao Yuni narrowed his eyes and took a few steps closer. "Shu, I've known you for 11 years and we're childhood sweethearts. You should know me best, so I don't have to hide it in front of you. You'd better not defend another man in front of me. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to control the knife in my hand." For a moment, the atmosphere in the room was extremely tense, like a bow that was pulled to its limit and would break at any time. Facing such a stubborn Xiao Yuni, Ning Shu suddenly did not know how to deal with him. Fortunately, the door creaked open. I'm really sorry. This lowly official was caught up in some miscellaneous matters in the Yamen, and kept the two of you waiting. Please forgive this lowly official's mistake." An anxious voice rushed in, temporarily easing the tense atmosphere in the room. Ning Shu took the chance to walk away from Xiao Yuni. She turned back and saw a young man in an embroidered robe running in, hurriedly wiping the sweat off his forehead as he bowed apologetically. This person had a round baby face and was neither tall nor short. He smiled at everyone he met, and he didn't look like an adult at all. He was clearly an amiable and harmless youth. Secretly rejoicing that this person had appeared to resolve the situation, Ning Shu smiled faintly and said, "You must be the Xiaoqing of the Supreme Court. My daughter Ning Shu greets the Lord." When the man heard Ning Shu introduce herself, he suddenly froze for some reason. An inexplicable naivety appeared on his face, and then he said cheerfully, "Ah, what do you mean by sir, or sir? Lady Ning is being so courteous. It's really too much for this Tan. It's my first time meeting Miss. It's my pleasure to meet you. Lord Tan, you're already a Xiaoqing at such a young age. You're really a pillar of the country. My daughter admires you very much. Lord Tan, why are you so modest?" Ning Shu greeted the other party politely. She had just said a few words when she suddenly felt that something was wrong. Wait a minute. His surname was Tan? Her heart skipped a beat, and she suddenly remembered that this Xiaoqing of the Supreme Court seemed to have the surname Tan. and his name was Siwei. He was the youngest son of the Prime Minister Tan's family, and the most anticipated candidate among the candidates that her father had chosen for her to be her fourth husband. As for her mother, she had only gone to the Prime Minister's family this afternoon to get closer. Chapter 166. If Xiao Minglan was the biggest weirdo in the capital city, then Tan Siwei would be the second weirdo. When he was 8 or 9 years old, he accidentally read a travel book about mountains and rivers. He set his ambition to imitate Su Xiaka and travel to all the famous mountains and rivers. But how could Prime Minister Tan and his wife bear to let their youngest son be exposed to the elements? So they tried their best to stop him. But young Master Tan was stubborn. Once he set his ambition, he would not change his mind. Either he would climb the wall today and accidentally fall from the wall and break his bones, or he would fly down from the roof with a big kite on his back and escape with the wind. In the end, he would be hung on a tree branch for an entire day and night, becoming a joke to countless passers-by. In short, he would be escaping or planning to escape for 300 out of 365 days in a year. He was famous throughout the city. Until 2 years ago, when he reached an agreement with Prime Minister Tan, he suddenly changed his mind and entered the Supreme Court. Many people were waiting to see if this young master would continue to cause trouble. They didn't expect that although this young master looked unreliable, he was very reliable in doing things. Within a few years, he was sitting in the position of Shaoqing. This was also the reason why Duke Ning liked him. Hearing Ning Shu's polite expression of respect, the bitterness on Tan Siwei's face became even stronger. He hurriedly said, "Miss Ning, you flatter me. It really makes me feel ashamed and fearful. Please don't say that. Miss, you solved the Phoenix Terrace case bravely, which really made me amazed. I have always wanted to have a chance to ask you for advice. Today, I have finally met you." As he spoke, his baby face faintly blushed. He looked pure and innocent, completely different from his dissolute elder brother. Awkward, incomparably awkward. Ning Shu wailed in her heart, wondering why she had been so unlucky recently. Then, she pretended not to understand anything and smiled apologetically. She was thinking that today's meal would be difficult and how to get through it. Then she heard a voice outside the room. The voice was respectful, cautious and lively. It was a little familiar. "Shiziyi, there is a threshold in front. Be careful." Then Ning Shu saw Xiaoqing slowly step into the room with Huema's help. For some reason, His Highness the Crown Prince was not wearing his usual black clothes today. Instead, he was wearing a frost-colored robe. His cloak was also of the same color. This Xiaoqing was different from his cold, indifferent and alienated appearance when he was dressed in black. This Xiaoqing was elegant, gentle, and jade-colored like a celestial being. As soon as he entered one's sight, his eyes lit up and he was breathtaking. After a brief moment of absent-mindedness, Ning Shu came back to her senses and looked around. Thus Xiao Yuni, who was dressed in scarlet, Tan Siwei, who was dressed in a blue python robe, and Xiaoqing, who was as white as a fairy, surrounded Ning Shu, forming a tripartite formation. A word silently entered Ning Shu's mind. What was it again? It was really a hell on earth. Although Tan Siwei was a weirdo and pure person, he was not sloppy when it came to serious matters. When he saw that the nobles had all arrived, he immediately arranged for the servants to start preparing for the banquet. Incense was lit, tea was served, and dishes were served. He also called for musicians to liven things up. In addition to Ning Shu and the other three, there were also 2 officials from the Ministry of Justice who were ordered to investigate the imperial astronomer. The 2 officials were very tactful. They knew that their official positions were low and did not deserve to sit with the nobles. Thus they sat together. As a result, only Xiaoqing, Xiao Yuni, and Tan Siwei were left with an empty seat beside each of them at the square table. Ning Shu silently glanced at the 3 seats and the people next to them. Her face was numb. Tan Siwei did not know what was going on. Seeing that Ning Shu was motionless like a piece of wood, he took the initiative to stand up and invite her. "Lady Ning, there are still 3 seats left. If Miss doesn't mind, why don't you sit with me?" On the other side, Xiao Yuni snorted coldly. He raised his eyebrows and glanced at Tan Siwei, then looked at Ning Shu. It doesn't seem appropriate for Lord Tan and Shu to sit together for the first time. Speaking of which, Shu and I have known each other for many years and have taken care of each other. Sure, you should come over to my side. At the last table, Huema, who was standing behind Xiahou Qing, rolled his eyes and immediately raised his voice. My lords, you may not know this, but in the Phoenix stage case, Miss Ning and my Shitzi were partners all the way. They had a tacit understanding and should sit together with my Shitzi. Chapter 167. No matter which of the 3 seats she sat on, it seemed to be wrong. It was the middle of Yangyue, the beginning of summer. It was the most suitable time of the year. The weather was clear and peaceful, not too cold or too hot. It was just right. Outside the Chasing Cloud and Moon Chasing restaurant, the white pears on both sides of the road gradually fell, and the snow-white viburnum flowers followed closely behind. A lush flower branch happened to fall by the window, clustered together like an umbrella, but also somewhat like an embroidered ball. It was very pleasing to the eye. But in this kind of weather, Ning Shu suddenly felt a sense of oppression like adding oil to a fire. Facing the scorching gazes in front of her, she forced a smile, not letting herself show fear. She glanced from the corner of her eyes, and suddenly found an acquaintance among the musicians who were called in to liven things up. It was Chun Yang, whom she met at the moon-embracing lake. She let out a long sigh of relief in her heart, and put on her most appropriate smile. Sirs, my daughter ate a little too much for lunch, so I'm not hungry yet. Sirs, please eat first. Recently, my daughter has been quite interested in the zither. It's rare that Miss Chun Yang is here today, so I'd like to take this opportunity to learn from her. After Ning Shu bowed, she stiffly bypassed the 3 big Buddhas and walked in the direction of Chun Yang. Unexpectedly, she had only taken a few steps when she suddenly stepped on something and her whole body fell to the side. Coincidentally, she was sitting on one knee on an empty soft seat, under the stunned gazes of everyone in the room. Half of her body fell into someone's arms. What entered her eyes was a refreshing frost, and a faint du-hung fragrance lingered on the tip of her nose. She was wearing a blue dress today, elegant and charming. Suddenly, she blended in with the frost, closely and harmoniously, as if they were born together and should not be separated. Xiao Yini frowned. Sure. Tan Siwei was stunned. Ning, Lady Ning? Huiyamo almost laughed out loud in his heart, and said proudly, It seems that Lady Ning is willing to sit with my family's young master. His words brought Ning Shu back from her daze. She hurriedly got up from his arms. It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. My daughter accidentally slipped and bumped into your highness. I ask your highness to forgive my daughter's offense. But the little deer in her heart ran out of the circle, as if it was drunk. Ning Shu attributed it to the fact that he was dressed too coquettishly today. He was obviously out to attract bees and butterflies, and no one could resist him. She laughed dryly and awkwardly struggled in this deadly azura field. I won't disturb you. I'll go and ask Chun Yang to teach me how to play the zither. Sirs, please do as you please. Ning Shu was about to flee when she heard Xiahou Qing, who had been silent all this time, suddenly clenched his fist and coughed softly. Cough, cough. Huiyamo was stunned. He thought that the young master had just taken the medicine when he came to the banquet. How could he cough again? The next moment he suddenly had an idea. He used all the cleverness of his 800 lifetimes at this moment. He hurriedly put on a worried and self-reproachful expression. Master, are you coughing again? I'm so stupid. I left the medicine in the mansion and didn't bring it out. What should I do? Huimo's face was filled with anxiety. In the end, he could only plead with Ning Shu. That medicine was mixed with other medicines. Other than this servant, no one can tell it apart. This servant has to go back and get it personally. But my young master doesn't like strangers to serve him. So I can only ask you to take care of all the servants in the house. My young master has a disease in his eyes and can't see. It's common for him to get hurt if no one takes care of him. Miss, please take care of young master for me. I'll be back in a moment. After that, he didn't wait for Ning Shu to agree or refuse. Huiyamo forced her to sit beside Xiahou Qing and then ran away in a hurry. But when he went downstairs, he was smiling happily. Chapter 168. Ning Shu finally understood how Zhao Kuangyin felt when he was forced to wear the emperor's robe. Ha. Ha ha. The reason that Huiyamo found was too dignified. If she refused, she would be heartless. She lowered her head and numbly picked up the chopsticks under the burning gaze of the people. She put some food into the porcelain bowl beside Xia Hoqing's hand, and said like a wooden person, "Your Highness, please." Xia Hoqing's lips moved slightly and said, "Thank you." During the meal, Ning Shu felt like she was sitting on a needle. It was the first time that she was so against the chasing cloud and moon-chasing restaurant. Opposite her, Xiao Yuni's gaze almost burned through her. Tan Siwei's gaze was also extremely confused, not to mention the other two officials of the Ministry of Justice. They looked as if they wanted to immediately spread what they had seen and heard at the banquet, so that all their colleagues could carefully savor it together. Finally, the meal came to an end. Ning Shu was about to let out a sigh of relief when she heard Xiao Yuni put down the wine cup and said coldly, "Prince Xiahou, I'm afraid there's something that I have to remind you. Since the Prince Xiahou's princess consort has been decided, then it's best that you don't provoke some people that you shouldn't provoke." Xia Hoqing leisurely responded, "May I ask the sixth prince, the marriage ceremony, the acceptance ceremony, the big betrothal gifts, and the invitation ceremony, none of these have been carried out. It was only a hasty drawing of lots, and the person who was chosen has now disappeared without a trace. How does the sixth prince affirm that the candidate for my southern pacifying Wang Fu's heir consort has already been decided? Also, who are the people that I, Xia Hoqing, shouldn't provoke? I, Xia Hoqing, shouldn't provoke, but sixth prince can? I've long heard that Prince Xiahou is very smart. Today, I've seen it for myself. Sixth Prince Xia Hoqing is also good at concealing his strength and biding his time." The two people were arguing with each other, but in fact they were fighting with their swords. Fortunately, Tan Siwei was quick-witted and mediated the situation. "Hee, your highnesses are both dragons and phoenixes among men. This lowly official admires both of you. This lowly official boldly proposes a toast to your highnesses." Ning Shu was speechless. She turned to the two officials of the Ministry of Justice, who were as quiet as wooden chickens, and asked, "May I ask the two officials, how is the interrogation going at the Imperial Astronomer? Did you get any useful information from the interrogation?" The Imperial Astronomer's divination was the origin of the whole case, and also the first thread in the whole mess. If it could be solved, then the rest would be easily solved. Unfortunately, the two shook their heads in unison. "We've detained all 38 members of the Imperial Astronomer and interrogated them one by one. We've been interrogating them day and night, but we haven't found anything yet. But don't worry, Miss Ning. We'll inform you as soon as we have good news." "Thank you, my lords." Ning Shu nodded her head in thanks. With a perturbed heart, Ning Shu looked left and right. Finally, Huema arrived late and the banquet ended. Tan Siwei bowed to the few people. "Thank you for coming to the banquet today. If I have done anything wrong, please forgive me. I only hope that we can solve the case as soon as possible and find Miss Qi, so that we can live up to the Emperor's kindness. In short, you will have to work hard in the near future." Everyone politely returned the greeting. Ning Shu used the excuse of catching up with Chun Yang. She stayed for a while, and finally sent the few Buddhas away. Chun Yang's mind was clear. When she saw Ning Shu coming over with a bitter smile, she gently plucked a string of melodious music. Under the music, she covered her mouth and laughed softly. She joked with Ning Shu. "Lady Ning is really charming. Good Chun Yang, don't make fun of me." Ning Shu begged with a bitter smile. Then, she thought of something and asked, "Have you sent Lan Xiang and Nainu's ashes back to Qingzhou?" "Yes, Lan Xiang disguised herself as Nainu and became friends with me. Her biggest wish was to find a good sister and return to her hometown with her. I can be considered as half of her bosom friend. If I don't fulfill this wish for her, who can fulfill her wish? In the end, we are just rootless duckweeds floating in the world," Chun Yang said with emotion. Her eyes were red and she quickly blinked her eyes to stop herself. "Oh, why am I saying these depressing words for no reason? Previously, when the pleasure boat caught fire, I had nowhere to go. The procuress almost sold me to the brothel. Thanks to Lady Ning's recommendation to Prince Ke for me, I have such a good shelter. Chun Yang is very grateful. It's just a small matter. Chun Yang, if you continue to be so polite, you will be estranged from me. Ningshu smiled and then returned to the topic. Chun Yang, you should have heard about the case that happened in the past 2 days, right? To be honest, I have something to ask you. Chapter 169. Are you talking about the disappearance of 4th Miss Qi in the Imperial Palace? Chun Yang couldn't help but sigh. This matter has been blown out of proportion. Who in the entire capital doesn't know about it? I heard many guests in the restaurant talking about it. They all said that it's related to the 13th princess. Some people also said that it's the doing of the wolf demon who has been pestering 4th Miss Qi. Both the truth and the lies made people terrified. What? Is there anything I can help you with? Feel free to ask. As long as I know, I'll tell you everything. Ningshu didn't beat around the bush and asked directly. Chun Yang, have you ever heard of a demon that can transform into a human? Or a person that can transform into a demon? Chun Yang lived in the mortal world. She had dealt with the highest nobles, merchants, and peddlers. In her line of work, she seemed to be humble and inconspicuous. In fact, the things she had heard of might even be beyond the reach of the Imperial College. Therefore Ningshu asked this question. Chun Yang frowned and thought carefully. She deliberated and said, I've seen a lot of demons or demons that can transform into humans in novels. I've also seen it on the stage. Other than that, I've never heard of anyone talking about it. Maybe it's because I don't know much. How about this? When I have time, I'll ask all the sisters I know. If I get any news, I'll immediately inform you. Ningshu thanked her solemnly. Then I'll have to trouble Chun Yang and my sisters. Women like us who float in the mortal world have always been despised and looked down upon. How many people can treat us sisters like humans like you? There's an old saying that a gentleman will die for his bosom friend. What's the big deal about doing something for you? After bidding farewell to Chun Yang, Ningshu walked out of the Chasing Cloud and Moon restaurant. She rubbed her temples and felt that the meal just now was more difficult than solving the case. Forsythia had been waiting at the door for a long time. When she saw Ningshu coming out, she hurriedly opened the curtain and helped her into the carriage. Zigui was already waiting for her in the carriage with the news. Ningshu did not beat around the bush and asked directly, Where are the servants of the Qi family who followed Qi Zhaoyu into the palace? Zigui said. They testified to each other that before 4th young mistress Qi went missing, they were always together and none of them left. The probability of them committing a crime together was too low. The Supreme Court considered that they were both from the Qi family and could be considered half a victim, so they were temporarily released back to the Qi family. However, they were ordered not to leave the residence in the near future and to be summoned at any time. Ningshu nodded. The Supreme Court's arrangement was not without reason. After all, outsiders staying in the palace for a long time was not a long-term solution. She continued. You must keep a close eye on them. They served them all the way. Even when Qi Zhanyu went to rest, they were still guarding outside. I don't believe that there is a monster that can silently and invisibly steal people out of thin air. Qi Jueyu's disappearance may be related to one of them. Your subordinate will go right away. Zigui was swift and decisive in his actions. He jumped off the carriage after receiving the order. Ningshu quietly thought about the many puzzling mysteries in the case in the carriage. She tried to find the hidden common points and connect them together. Her thoughts were like lightning when the carriage stopped for some reason. She lifted the curtain and asked, What's going on? Forsythia pouted and pointed to the front. Ningshu looked over and saw an extremely familiar carriage was leisurely parked diagonally in front of them. It was also the corner that they had to pass to return to the residence. The coachman was very lively and even waved at them from afar. Who else could it be other than Huema? Ningshu's molars silently itched. She smiled, her face full of fragrance. She lifted the hem of her skirt and got off the carriage. She unceremoniously boarded the carriage of the southern pacifying Wang Fu. She faced Xiaoqing, who was drinking tea and resting inside and quietly waiting for her to arrive, and questioned him. Your Highness, Why did you play with my daughter like that at the banquet? Without anyone else present, Ningshu's tone could not help but have a hint of condemnation. Chapter 170. What are you talking about? In the face of Ningshu's questioning, Xiaoqing was still leisurely and complacent. Ningshu said, Your Highness was talking with the sixth prince at the banquet just now. It was very lively. Xiao Yuni and Tan Siwei had already given her enough headaches. This noble immortal also inexplicably got involved. Did he think that she was dying too slowly? Recently, there have been several incredible cases surrounding me, so my heart is inevitably complicated. I casually talked with the sixth prince for a while. Is there a problem? Ningshu took out a round bead from her sleeve. Then what about this bead that made me slip? Xiaoqing gently turned the azure teacup in his hand. The silver needle in the teacup was floating, and the light green tea water was sparkling as he turned it. He asked, What bead? How big or small is it? Ningshu looked down and carefully looked at the slightly blunt round bead. It's the size of a rice grain. The color is not bad. It's a song. Xiaoqing did not answer her. He knocked on the small table and asked Huiyamo to come in. When did our Lord Pingnan's mansion have such a worthless bead? Huiyamo poked his head in from outside and looked at the bead that Ningshu patted on the small table. He opened his mouth and said, Master, such a low-class bead can't even roll over the threshold of the Lord Pingnan's mansion. After Huiyamo finished speaking, Xiaoqing smiled slightly and raised his eyebrows at Ningshu. Ningshu was suddenly speechless. Thinking about it, it seemed to be right. The Crown Prince of Nanping was not ordinary when he did not make a move. Once he made a move, it must be extraordinary. What huge Eastern bead gold foil hidden weapon. He was so extravagant that it made people's heart ache. Such an inconspicuous bead was indeed very incompatible with this person. Could it be that she was overthinking things? Ningshu forced a smile and softened her tone. She silently leaned closer to the heir of Xiahou, who had always been difficult to deal with, and apologized. I'm very sorry that I misunderstood Your Highness. I hope that Your Highness will forgive me and don't be calculative with my daughter. Fortunately, Xiaoqing was very magnanimous. It doesn't matter. Just don't do it again. He let the matter pass. Huiyamo retracted his head and hurriedly sat back on the driver's seat. He secretly stuck out his tongue where Ningshu couldn't see and felt guilty. It was true that such beads couldn't enter the Nanping mansion, but there were many of them on the curtains of the Chasing Cloud and Moon Tower. They weren't valuable, so no one would notice if one or two of them were missing. However, he felt that it would be better for him to swallow this small detail into his stomach quietly. In fact, Ningshu didn't think of it. It was just that she didn't dare to suspect that the heir of Nanping Mansion would make a move on the bead curtains of the Chasing Cloud and Moon Tower. She only thought that the bead curtains had loosened and a few of them fell, causing her to be unlucky. Huiyamo felt guilty and quietly listened to the heir of Nanping Mansion. He said indifferently, What have you figured out so far? How did Your Highness know that I already have an idea? Ningshu blinked and was a little curious. You stayed in the Chasing Cloud and Moon Tower just now to ask Chunyang for help. If you didn't have doubts in your heart, you wouldn't have asked. Having been completely guessed by Xiaoqing, Ningshu suddenly felt as if she had found a soulmate in the twists and turns of the mountain road. This feeling was very strange. In the past 300 years, she had met countless people and met countless ghosts. Only this person could always guess what she was thinking. She didn't have this feeling even when she was the most intimate with Xiao Yuni in her previous life. Xiaoqing's figure was clearly reflected in her eyes. He was dressed in frost and looked elegant. As long as he stepped out of the carriage, the girls in the nearby streets would immediately surround him and scream crazily. Ningshu's eyes couldn't help but ripple slightly and she looked away. Chapter 171. She pursed her lips and sternly said, Your Highness is not often in the capital, so you might not know. I remember when I was 7 or 8 years old, there was indeed a popular vaudeville troupe in the capital that raised wolf demons, dog demons, and even bear demons. It attracted a lot of people. At that time, I was curious and asked my mother to take me to see it. But at that time, I felt that it was devoid of spirituality and forced animals to learn human things for people's entertainment. So, I didn't go see it again. After about half a year, that vaudeville troupe probably made enough money in the capital and went somewhere else, so I never heard of it again. At that time, I was young and didn't think too deeply about it. Now that I think about it, those monsters and bear demons were really strange. No matter how skilled the vaudeville troupe was, animals were animals after all. After being whipped countless times, they could be trained to do the corresponding actions when they heard keywords. But learning to write was really too strange. I felt that there might be a problem here, so I asked Chun Yang to help me ask around. Other than that, I can't say for sure, but I found a similarity. Ning Shu slowly drew 3 circles on the small table, and then drew a line between them to connect them. Did Your Highness find it? Whether it was the Imperial Astronomer, Weiyang Palace, or Wenfang Palace, the method of committing the crime was surprisingly similar. Xiaoqing took over and slowly said, they were all under the watchful eyes of everyone, and they all had each other's companions as witnesses. But in one place, the signature was swapped. In another place, the concubine selection was made into a ghost under our eyes. In another place, a living person disappeared without a trace. That's right, Ning Shu nodded. Just like every lock has a key. The concubine selection key was the dead Shunxing, so the other 2 locks must also have the key to unlock them. As for the key to the curse of the 8 characters, I suspect that there was a problem with one of the 8 eunuchs that Imperial concubine Qi sent. And Qi Zhuanyu was kidnapped, so the key is very likely to be with the wolf demon that she killed and came back to take her life after 9 years. She and Xiaoqing had discussed the matter of the Imperial Astronomer before. It was really too difficult for someone in the Imperial Astronomer to succeed, because every later step could be discovered. Furthermore, she had carefully examined that piece of paper before she went to the banquet, and there were no traces of magic. Therefore, only those 8 people had the opportunity to commit the crime. Moreover, on the night the lot was taken and sent to the palace, it was raining heavily. The lights were all extinguished, giving that person an opportunity to take advantage of. As for whether he was a true confidant or a fake confidant, don't forget that a person's heart was separated by their bellies. Ning Shu said. Those 8 eunuchs are all Imperial concubine Qi's trusted aides. I am unable to appear personally, so I can only ask Your Highness to send someone to investigate. As for Shunxing, although she is dead, the matter is not over. You want to investigate the death of Wen Kairan 6 years ago? Xiaoqing's hand, which was habitually twisting the bones in his palm, suddenly stopped. Ning Shu nodded slowly. Yes. Xiaoqing lightly sneered between his teeth. Secret matters deep in the palace, Imperial concubines secretly fighting, behind the scenes represents an unfathomable power struggle. The person has already been dead for so many years, and you want to bring up this old debt. Your courage is not small. Ning Shu was not the least bit afraid. She beamed and said, Don't I have Your Highness to support me? When she was flattering others, Ning Shu's voice was especially obedient, just like the most famous honey milk soup in the Chasing Cloud Chasing Moon restaurant. The beef cheese that was brewed perfectly was brushed with a thin layer of fresh and sweet honey. Then, a circle of ice was poured over it and hurriedly delivered to the guests' tables. Spoonful by spoonful, it was cool and sweet. Since the age of 17, Xiaoqing had lost his sense of taste. Fortunately, he didn't care much about eating, and these years, he didn't have too many regrets. Only recently, he suddenly remembered the sweetness he had tasted in the past 10 years. Chapter 172. With 2 dark circles under his eyes, Huema gently knocked on the small door of the west corner of Duke Ning's house. Forsythia, who had been guarding there, heard the noise. She opened the door and greeted Huema. Then she went in to report to Ning Shu. Soon Ning Shu, who had changed into a short coat, came out of the house. She got on the other horse that Huema brought along. The 2 horses, one black and one red, were both good horses. They stepped on their hooves and flew steadily and briskly into the moonlight that shrouded the top of their heads. They blended into the bottomless night of the imperial city. Lady Ning, I've investigated the corpse of the poisonous bee you gave me before. It's called the ghost bee. Its stinger is very poisonous. If you are stung by it, the venom will flow into your blood and into your heart. If you don't get treatment, you will die in a few days. And its symptoms are very similar to coughing up blood during the epidemic, so it's easy to ignore. While riding the horse, Huema quickly shared with her the result of staying up late these 2 days. He was very tired, but his eyes were shining. This kind of poisonous bee can only be found in Nanjiang. It can only breed in the humid and hot environment there. We don't have it in the Central Plains. Ningshu listened quietly. The moon was bright tonight, but her eyes were not inferior to the moon. Instead, they were more clear and bright. So it means that first, this kind of poisonous bee can't be touched by ordinary people. Second, 13th Princess didn't lie to me. One siren's death was not caused by the epidemic or an accident. It was a deliberate murder. Third, Shenxing really wanted to avenge his close friend. Huema followed her thoughts and thought for a long time. Then he put forward a vague speculation. The information about the poisonous bee and one siren's death were both given by 13th Princess. Is it possible that she also participated in it to avenge her mother? Ningshu said. Without conclusive evidence, we can't determine who is the suspect out of thin air. Anyway, let's check the corpse first and see if we can find any useful clues. In the moonlight, she bent over and rode the horse. She held the reins in her hands tightly. The horse galloped in the direction of the Imperial Mausoleum. 20 miles away from the Imperial Mausoleum, they ran into the guards of the first inspection. Ningshu took out a copper pass from her bosom and rode her horse past the checkpoint. In order to find clues from the dead, an autopsy was necessary. Ever since she mentioned it to Xiaoqing, in less than 24 hours, she received permission to explore failing with Huemo at night. It didn't take long for them to reach the second checkpoint. Before they reached the third checkpoint, Ningshu and Huema pulled the reins and turned the horses to the left. According to the Imperial Academy of Medicine's report, when Chiron had died of an epidemic, under such circumstances, it was not suitable to be buried in the Imperial Mausoleum. Otherwise, it would ruin the Imperial family's true dragon qi. Thus, a separate area was set up 5 li northwest of the Imperial Mausoleum, and she was hastily buried. Buried with her, there were many abandoned concubines who had died of madness, exhaustion, and loneliness in the cold palace. As for the mausoleum keeper, there was actually one arranged. It was an old eunuch with grizzled hair, blurred eyes, and deaf ears. As soon as the sky turned dark, he began to feel drowsy. If it weren't for the fact that he could still breathe, people would have thought that he was one of the old zombies of this mausoleum. As for guarding against tomb robbers, don't make a fool of yourself. Which concubine buried here could get a generous burial gift before they died? To be able to be changed into a neat palace dress, they already had to thank His Majesty. The people of the Southern Pacifying Lord's Mansion were peerless people. The horses of the Southern Pacifying Lord's Mansion were also extraordinary horses. They had already covered more than 10 li in less than 2 hours. Nay, with a soft cry, the horse slowly slowed down its 4 hooves. At this time, the moon was slanting to the west at a moderate angle. The nights of the 4th month were no longer cold, but Ningshu still felt desolate for no reason as she stood in front of the silent mausoleum. It was as if there were countless young, old, sad, and resentful women's sighs coming from all directions. The bright moon above her head was also immersed in the icy water. Chapter 173. Once Huemo entered, he couldn't help but shudder. His entire body felt cold. This place feels so eerie. Seeing him shrink his shoulders and tighten his grip on the reins, Ningshu couldn't help but laugh. Haven't you dealt with hundreds of corpses and cut open many of them with your own hands? Why are you still scared? It's different. Huemo couldn't explain it himself. He just scratched his head and said, I keep feeling that there's a lot of resentment here. It's like someone is crying beside my ear. To be honest, Ningshu also felt that the Imperial Mausoleum was too shabby compared to the Imperial Mausoleum that was 5 li away. However, she didn't want to say it out loud to increase Huimo's fear. It could only be said that compared to the countless palace maids who died unjustly in the palace, this place was much better. At least they had a place to rest after death. Ningxu said, "The death of a person is like the extinguishing of a lamp. All gratitude and enmity are gone. Resentment and grief are mostly the conjectures and experiences of us living people. Don't think too much and start working." Huiyamo nodded. He jumped off the horse and took off his tool bag. "I'm going to work." Madam One, just like her appearance that the emperor despised for being too plain. Her name was also ordinary. Weniji. Her family background was even worse. She was just a 6th or 7th rank general. The greatest contribution her father had made was probably 38 years ago, when Zhao Wenzhong of Jingzhou plotted a rebellion. At that time, as the 4th prince, Jin Sheng was ordered by the late emperor to quell the rebellion. He was almost surrounded by a series of plots. The late old prince Yu led an army to save Jin Sheng. However, he was separated from old Princess Yu in the chaos. Weniji's father found the missing old Princess Yu by chance and escorted her back to the city. Old Prince Yu was very grateful and was promoted from a 7th rank general to a 6th rank general. However, before his bright future could continue for long, an infection caused him to die. Only his widowed wife and young daughter were left to suffer in the world. This branch of the Wen family had no children, so it could be said that the family line was cut off. Each and every one of the clan members stared at this pair of weak mother and daughter like hungry wolves, wanting to seize this branch's property. Madam Wen's mother was angered to death. A few years later, Madam Wen was sent to the palace to serve the royal family, accumulating virtue and enjoying a good life. This was also one of the reasons why old Princess Consort Yu chose to raise the 13th princess, after old Prince Yu passed away a few years ago. It could be said that she was repaying the kindness of the past. Ningxu helped Huema to light up a few candles around the coffin. The two of them put on silk gloves and covered their faces with a handkerchief soaked in vinegar and garlic paste. They started to dig into the ground to open the coffin. In this aspect, Huiyamo was experienced and his speed was very fast. Ningxu had always been calm in front of charred corpses and rotting corpses. After half an hour, they dug out a large pile of soil, revealing a complete cypress coffin. "This talented lady, this little one came to disturb you because of your grievance. Please don't blame me. I have offended you." Huiyamo put his hands together and muttered a few words. He bowed again and changed to another set of tools to prepare the coffin. When he was about to insert the dagger into the crack, his wrist was suddenly held down by Ningxu. "Wait. This coffin has been opened before." Under the moonlight, Ningxu's eyes were very sharp. Huiyamo was stunned for a moment, and hurriedly took a lamp from the side to take a closer look. He suddenly exclaimed, "It's true." He hastily jumped into the pit and walked around the coffin with the lamp in his hand. He said, "These nails have traces of being opened and then nailed back in place. The top and bottom of the coffin also have some wear and tear. For example, there are 2 small pieces of tung oil paint here. My God, people have died so miserably. Who is so wicked to dig up people's graves?" Chapter 174. The corner of Ningxu's mouth twitched. She raised her head and looked at him silently. After he finished talking, Huiyamo realized that he was also scolding himself. He hurriedly added, "I'm not talking about us, I mean other than us. Let me see, from the light rust left by the second corrosion, it doesn't seem to be too old. It should be within a year or so. This shows that our suspicions should be correct." Ningxu also rolled up her sleeves, revealing a small section of her snow-white wrist. She jumped into the pit and looked around the coffin. "The other party is very cautious. I can't find any clues outside the coffin. Let's lift the coffin and take a look." The 7 suppressing nails were removed one by one. Under the hazy moonlight, the heavy coffin lid was lifted. That literary talent who had swallowed a bellyful of tears finally reappeared in this world. The thick stench of corpses mixed with the smell of tulip juice. The smell was unparalleled. Even though there was a thick handkerchief between them, Huiyamo and Ningxu almost fell over from the smell. They both turned their faces away at the same time. TSK, this is troublesome." When the smell dissipated, Huiyamo put half of his head into the coffin. He swept his eyes up and down and showed an embarrassed expression. It was common knowledge that the older a corpse was, the harder it was to examine it. Even if there were simple anti-corrosion measures, after 6 years, the corpse had already changed beyond recognition. Only the shape of the flesh and bones stuck to the palace dress could be vaguely seen. It was a slender woman about 6 feet tall. As for the rest, it was really a headache. Ning Shu said, "We can check the poison." Huiyemo nodded. "It seems that we can't do anything else." He quickly took out a bag of silver needles and began to work. Next to him, Ning Shu didn't disturb him. She just held an oil lamp. In the flickering flame gently blown by the breeze, she quietly looked at the talented scholar, who was born inconspicuous and died inconspicuously. No matter how ordinary a family was, after their loved ones passed away, they would gather a few cups and pots to be buried with them. However, when Siren's tomb was very clean, other than the rotten flesh and rotten palace robes, there was nothing else inside. Ning Shu looked carefully for a long time before she dug out a dark gray and heavy object from the slight protrusion of the palace robes on her chest. In Ning Bai's eyes, the strange thing in her hand clearly reflected. Ning Shu blinked and vaguely recognized it. "This is a name lock?" The colorful thread tied to it had long been rotten and would break at a touch. Only the rusty body of the lock still maintained the shape of a bat, which meant Fu. A name lock, also known as a longevity lock. Almost every baby's family would put one on him or her after they were born. Rich families would carefully make one with gold, jade, and jewelry. Ordinary families would choose the cheaper silver, and the lowest grade would be copper. But no matter what kind of material it was made of, it would be engraved with the words "long life and wealth," which represented thousands of parents' hope for their children to grow up safely. The one in Ning Shu's hand was made of medium silver. There were 3 delicate bells at the bottom, which could make a crisp bell sound when it was shaken slightly. Huiyemo heard the bell sound and looked over. He curiously said, "She died an unnatural death at a young age, but she was buried with a longevity lock that represented longevity and wealth. This is so creative." It was not only creative, but also inexplicably ironic. What did the person who chose the burial objects for her think? If it was intentional, it was really vicious. He thought for a while and said, "Could it be that the talented scholar made this for the 13th princess when she was born?" Before the talented scholar died, he was reluctant to part with his beloved daughter, so he asked the 13th princess to take the longevity lock that the 13th princess wore when she was young to be buried with him. It makes sense. It shouldn't be. Ning Shu slowly shook her head. Judging from the blackened appearance of the silver lock, it may be 20 or 30 years old. Judging from the time, maybe the talented scholar was just born at that time. Chapter 175. Ning Shu couldn't figure out the longevity lock for the time being, so she took out a handkerchief and wrapped it up. She was going to take it back and study it carefully. On the other side, Huiyemo finished examining the front side of the corpse. With the help of Ning Shu, he carefully turned the corpse sideways and continued to stab with the silver needle. It didn't take long for him to find a rotten part of the heart. The silver needle immediately turned black as soon as it pierced into the heart. Huiyemo's face became serious. He hurriedly changed a knife and carefully cut out a small piece of rotten flesh from one of the places. After half an hour, he found the result. She was indeed killed by the poison of the ghost head bee. The place where the ghost head bee stung her was the back of her heart. The wound caused by the ghost head bee was very small. It was almost the size of a needle. If there was only one wound, it was reasonable that the Imperial Hospital couldn't find it at that time. However, Huiyemo and Ning Shu found no less than 8 rotten places on the back of one siren's body. Even a blind person could feel that there was something wrong with her death. The Imperial Hospital could lie through their teeth and say that she was killed by the epidemic. They were simply shameless. Ning Shu and Huiyemo didn't say anything for a while. They just silently turned her body over and carefully flipped it back. Soaked in tulip juice, the corpse was very slippery, coupled with the rotten flesh. Huiyemo was not careful and did not hold the corpse firmly, causing it to fall. He hurriedly apologized in a low voice, only to find that when the corpse was shaking, A round thing suddenly rolled out of its mouth and rolled to the edge of the coffin. Ningxu reached out her hand to take it, but Huiyamo stopped her. "Let me." Huiyamo pinched the black bead between his fingers and frowned. "This is..." After a long while, he dared to show an astonished expression and said in unison with Ningxu, "Soul-calming bead?" They checked the poison and took the longevity lock. Originally, they didn't intend to destroy the corpse. They didn't expect to find this thing by accident. This kind of soul-suppressing orb was usually used on the 3 types of deceased people to prevent them from coming back to life. The first type was soldiers who had killed people on the battlefield. The more people they killed, the heavier the bloodthirsty aura on them, and the easier it was for them to come back and cause chaos in the human world. The second type was people who were full of resentment before they died. Their eyes could not close before they died, indicating that they would definitely come back for revenge. The third type was pregnant women who died. Before the babies in their wombs could come to the human world, they were forced to go back to hell. Their resentment was very strong, and it was very easy for them to riot. When Chiron obviously did not belong to the first category. As for the second possibility, according to Xiao Zhangping's own words, before when Chiron died he persuaded her not to investigate the cause of her death. He only wanted Xiao Zhangping to live on peacefully and peacefully. Therefore, the resentment theory didn't hold water. If that was the case, it could only mean, "I'll have to trouble you to help me check if she..." Ningxu turned her face away and took a deep breath. This was the first time she felt that it was so difficult to ask a question. Was she pregnant before she died? Huimo's lips trembled slightly. He clenched the knife in his hand. After a while he nodded solemnly and stretched out the silver knife to the lower abdomen of the corpse. Then he broke out in a cold sweat and couldn't bear to look at it. He had cut open the head of an imperial censor who died by suicide. He had also cut open the body of a woman who committed suicide by jumping into the river. Not to mention the piles of people who died of starvation, illness, old age, and poison. Huiyamo was very confident in himself before. He thought that there was nothing in the world that he couldn't check. But now, he couldn't help but tremble when he saw the small bones carefully picked out from the rotten belly of Chiron. What was this? This was the skeleton of an infant that had yet to take shape. And even more so, it was a young creature that had almost come to the human world. However, there was someone who forcefully blocked his path to the human world, and he didn't even have the chance to cry out in grievance. Huimo's eyes were red and swollen. He clenched his teeth tightly. A pair of hands raised and reached over to cover his eyes. It was Ningxu. "Don't look. You go out first." Huiyamo thanked her gratefully. He wiped his tears and jumped out of the grave pit. He squatted not far away and silently calmed down. In the grave pit, in front of the coffin, Ningxu's slender figure stood straight. Her eyes quietly fell on the small bones that were smaller than toothpicks. It seemed that it was only 3 or 4 months old. It was just a lump of flesh and blood that had just turned into a human shape. So far, the outline of the cause of Chiron's death can be roughly described. After restoring Chiron's body as much as possible, they closed the coffin and covered the grave. Ningxu and Huimo went back to Namping Prince's mansion without stopping with the clues they had collected after a whole night of work. The moon was dim and the sky was about to be bright. The lights in Namping Prince's mansion were still lit. It seemed that they had been waiting for her all night. Chapter 176. This was an extremely cruel murder. She gently closed the yellowed file in her hand. Ningxu's movements were very careful, so she didn't tear the thin pages. She could barely feel the weight of the booklet in her hand. It was a simple record of the unremarkable life of the talented scholar. Walking out of the archives of the Imperial Household Department, which was as deep as a forest, Ningxu solemnly thanked the old eunuch who had opened the back door for her. Then, she rubbed her numb legs while whispering to Xiaoqing. As for why Xiaoqing was here, wasn't the face of Duke Namping's crown prince the best pass? She supported Xiaoqing all the way out of the dark and gloomy warehouse. They walked past the wall inlaid with 2 dragons playing with pearls, and then crossed the high threshold of the Imperial Household Department. Ningxu helped Xiaoqing into the carriage. 6 years ago, when Chiron was lucky enough to be pregnant with a dragon fetus again. This attracted the jealousy of a certain power in the harem, so they ruthlessly attacked her and poisoned her with the ghost head bee. Then, they threatened her with the 13th princess's life, forcing her not to say anything. When Chiron, who was alone and helpless, could only watch helplessly as she walked down the road to death. Before she died, she told the 13th princess not to investigate in order to save her daughter's life. Other people might not be able to conceive a dragon fetus in their lifetime, but when Chiron was really favored by the heavens. She had only been favored twice in her life. The first time, she was pregnant with the 13th princess, and the second time she was pregnant. Moreover, it was very likely that she was pregnant with a boy this time. Treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. Ningxu couldn't help but sigh. If she had a decent family background, or if she had a little bit of love from His Majesty, she wouldn't have been forced to walk down such a miserable path. Unfortunately, she didn't have anything. She only had her shoulders that were full of holes, and her daughter who was as weak as a flower branch that could be snapped with a pinch. If a woman's good luck was not matched by her ability to protect herself, then no matter how good her luck was, it would only bring endless disasters. Thus, the dragon's son that others begged for but couldn't get became a knife that she handed to others to kill herself. Judging from the direction of this case, I suspect that concubine Qi was the one who killed Wen Kai. As Ningxu spoke, she naturally helped Xia Hoqing to sit properly in the carriage. She then took a brocade cushion and placed it next to him to prevent him from being knocked over by the bumpy carriage. After doing all this, she was puzzled. Why was she becoming more and more adept at doing these things? She really did seem like a little eunuch who served Prince Namping. Ningxu silently slapped her own meddlesome paws and was speechless at herself. Servility was something that could not be tolerated. His sharp hearing seemed to have caught Ningxu's private movements. Xia Hoqing's throat moved, and a faint gentleness appeared on his lips. However, the arc was too shallow, and before Ningxu could notice it, it had already dissipated. This possibility is very high, he said. The carriage moved out steadily. Amidst the clattering of the hooves and the rolling of the wheels, Xia Hoqing methodically picked out the gold from the sand. Now, I will list out the newly discovered problems. First, when Siren's parents died early, and her closest friends were only the palace maids and eunuchs who worked with her in the past. Then, who was the leader of her revenge? 6 years ago, they didn't reach out to save her. Why did they work so hard 6 years later? Ningxu followed closely. Second, who was the person who dug the grave before us? From the signs of the coffin lid overlapping, the movements were very careful and didn't seem like the work of a grave robber. In addition, there were no traces of being touched on the corpse. Why did that person dig the grave and open the coffin? It can't be that they just looked. Xia Hoqingfu continued. Third, what's with that longevity lock? Chapter 177. She used silver washing water to wipe the black and gray rust spots on the longevity lock. Only then was she able to vaguely distinguish the shape of each engraving. Ningxu took the lock out of her sleeve and let it slip in with the breeze from the carriage curtain, making a crisp and melodious sound. Is there a possibility that the other party opened the coffin to put in this longevity lock? The sandcastle in Ningxu's mind was constantly being pushed down and rebuilt, but her parents died early. Who would come here inexplicably, open the coffin of an unfavored concubine who had been dead for many years, and put in a longevity lock made decades ago? Could it be that there is a close elder in her family, who is in a high position? We'll have to look into it again. Xia Hoqing didn't disturb her thoughts. After she finished muttering, he asked, What are you going to do with this lock? I'm going to ask a silversmith, Ningxu said. Her clear eyes blinked, and then her lips curved up. She opened the curtain and threw the lock to Huema outside. Thank you, Huema. Huema suddenly whined. Lady Ning, please forgive me. There are at least hundreds of silversmiths in the capital. Do you want me to ask them one by one? It's been so long. Even the maker may have forgotten that he made such a thing. Ningxu leisurely shook her head. No. The most complicated part of a longevity lock is the bell. It's not difficult for ordinary silversmiths to make it, but it's not easy to make it delicate enough. But the one that when Kai found in the heart can still make a crisp sound after so many years. The shape is perfectly round, and there are complicated hollow patterns carved on it. It's enough to show the craftsmanship of the craftsman. The government has always been strict in the field of silversmithing. Most of them are passed down from father to son. I heard that every brilliant craftsman will make a unique mark on his work to prevent others from making fake ones. So, you can ask them according to the ranking of the famous silversmiths in the capital. It should greatly shorten the time. Hearing this, Huema was still a little reluctant. Lady Ning's mouth was a coaxing ghost. When had she not ordered him around? He did not believe that this matter was as simple and quick as she made it out to be. Ning Shu saw him mumbling and said, "Forsythia will go with you." Huemo thinks for a while and says reluctantly, "Okay." Then he sighs. Forsythia, so be it. She was a girl after all, and her looks were, all right. She was still better than those coarse old men in the prince's residence. After deciding on the procedures for the investigation, Ning Shu returned to the duke's residence to catch up on some sleep. She would continue with the investigation once her mind was clear. However, after changing into her pajamas, she tossed and turned for a while and suddenly couldn't fall asleep. Because before she got down from Xiahou Qing's carriage, she suddenly remembered that concubine Qi had specially visited her Duke Ning the day before yesterday and gave her a warning outside the residence. She couldn't help but sigh. Concubine Qi had specially told me not only to take over this case, but also to do it well for her. If she knew that in the end, this case was traced back to her, my poor head ah. What are you afraid of? Xiahou Qing said lightly. Ha. Ning Shu looked at him in confusion. He casually moved his body and leaned against the brocade cushion she had placed beside him. His jade-colored slender fingers twirled the bone in his palm out of habit, as he lifted his chin slightly towards her. With me here, no one in this world has the ability to take your life, he added. Even if you Ning Shu die, you can only be buried with me in the future. Chapter 178. At that time, the sky was vast and the clouds were thin. The crisp sound of horse hooves pulling the carriage behind them leisurely passed the Great Xianghua Temple. 2 years ago, the Great Xianghua Temple introduced a kind of flower tree called Japanese cherry blossoms from Wenation. This year was the first year it bloomed. The pink snow cherry blossoms were really delicate and fresh, attracting many people in the capital to see it. As a result, the horse hooves gradually weakened, and the carriage Ning Shu and Xiahou Qing were in was blocked here. The people who had enjoyed the cherry blossoms walked out of the Xianghua Temple, still unsatisfied. As they walked, they exclaimed, "I really didn't expect that a flower tree sent from one nation thousands of miles away would bloom so well in our great estate. That drooping flower stem, pink and white petals and tender red stamens, it's like a delicate beauty. It's really beautiful." In the carriage, listening to the admiration of the people outside the carriage, Ning Shu's clear green eyes clearly reflected Xiahou Qing's slightly raised chin, and his light pink lips at this time. In a trance, she sighed like a flower lover. She really didn't expect it. Just like in that life, they hadn't even seen each other once. No one expected that there would be such an opportunity. Meeting, forming an alliance, solving cases side by side, and slowly forming such a deep bond. Silently, Ning Shu secretly took a deep breath. She remembered that more than half a month ago, when investigating the cloud leaf case, she had asked, "Your Highness, if in the end I still can't find the secret of the plum blossom kiss, will you really let me be buried with you?" He answered, "No. After death, I can only accept lying with another person unless that person is very close to me. You? The black tortoise outside my grave is still lacking a person." But now he changed his words. In total, it was no more than 30 to 50 words. After repeating it several times in her mind, she said, "It seems that your Highness said before, you don't need me to be buried with you." When Xiahou Qing heard her words, he couldn't help but feel a little reluctant. Xiahou Qing frowned and said, "When the first emperor passed away, 8,000 terracotta soldiers were buried with him. What? After I, Xiahou Qing, am dead, I can't accompany you, Ning Shu? Or do you want to go back on your oath?" Ningxu was silent for a moment. Your Highness is peerless. Don't talk about me. Even if you accompany 10 people, it's still not enough. Back then, my daughter had personally made an oath. Naturally, she remembered it. Ha! Outside the window came the sound of 5-year-old Ji, playing with the maidservants. She was like a bird that had just left its nest, tender and happy. Ningxu's lips curled into a smile amidst the laughter that was as pure as fresh snow. She slowly calmed down and no longer thought about anything else, falling asleep in a daze. 3 hours later, Ningxu was awakened. Zigui walked to Ningxu's bed with a serious expression. He looked at the young miss who was still in a deep sleep and hesitated for a moment before finally deciding to wake her up. Young miss, the missing Qi Juoyu has been found. His voice was very soft, but it made Ningxu suddenly open her eyes. A handful of cold water quickly woke her up. Ningxu quickly washed and changed her clothes while asking Zigui about the details of what had happened. Zigui said, to be exact, she wasn't found. She was accidentally found. After 4th Miss Qi went missing, everyone in the Marquis Lu's residence was worried. Madame Qi washed her face with tears all day long and Lord Qi also sighed. Thus, they decided to give out porridge in the east and west of the city to accumulate good fortune. They hoped that God would see their sincerity and send Qi Juoyu back in one piece. However, Marquis Lu's residence gave out porridge for several days, but there was still no news of Qi Juoyu. Madame Qi said that perhaps their hearts weren't sincere enough. There were still many sick and disabled beggars in the capital who couldn't get their own porridge. It would be better for them to take the initiative to send it over, so that the immortals would be touched. Most of the beggars lived under bridges in abandoned houses. Thus, the servants of the Qi family went to deliver the porridge. Then they found a female beggar under a bridge. Her voice was very similar to 4th Miss Qi's. Upon closer inspection, it was indeed her. They turned pale with fright, and hurriedly brought her back to their residence. Chapter 179. How is Qi Juanyu? Did she say what happened to her in the past few days when she disappeared? Ningxu asked. She can't say anything, Zigui replied. She can't recognize anyone and can't answer any questions. She has been screaming and screaming. As long as someone comes close, she will scratch and bite. Even her mother, Madame Qi, has been scratched by her. But she has been silently calling for Heir Xiaohou. She is no different from a lunatic. Zigui briefly summarized Qi Juanyu's terrible experience in a few words. Ningxu could not help but be speechless. And this news also spread throughout the capital at the fastest speed. For a time, every corner was talking about it in surprise. No one would have thought that the insufferably arrogant 4th Miss of the Qi family was really crazy, just like the curse on the signature. After fastening the last button, Ningxu did not wait for a moment, and immediately rushed to Marquis Lu Bo's residence. Because of concubine Qi's verbal order to investigate the case, even if Marquis Lu Bo's residence did not welcome her, they still let her in with a cold face. Before she stepped into the courtyard where Qi Juanyu lived, she heard the shrill screams from afar and the chaotic persuasion of the servants. Qi Juanyu was dirty and smelly. Her whole body emitted a pungent stench, as if she had just been dragged out of a livestock cage. Her hair was messy and her eyes were unfocused. Like a headless fly, she kept running in the courtyard with her head in her hands. She rolled and pushed away the servants who surrounded her one by one. The faces and bodies of the servants were full of scratches and bites from her. They were all bloody, but no one dared to come forward and forcibly restrain her. Because when she was forcibly brought back from under the bridge, Qi Juanyu struggled and kept hitting her forehead on the ground and the wall. She almost killed herself. My darling, how did it become like this? Master Tian, why don't you let me die first? Madame Qi leaned against the door and looked at her daughter who had lost her mind and was no different from a lunatic. She almost cried her heart out. Madame Qi cried until she was exhausted. Her vision blurred and she almost fell to the ground. Ningxu walked quickly and supported her in time. Madame Qi, how are you? Let me help you to rest. She didn't know which word or phrase of Ning Shu had touched Qi Jueyu's fragile nerves. When she heard this, her entire body tensed up. Her eyes widened, and she crawled out of the cabinet like a puppet. Then, she knelt in front of Madame Qi and slammed her forehead on the ground. As she kowtowed, she said frightening auspicious words. Old master, madam, young master, and young miss are in good health and have a long life. Everyone gasped and involuntarily took a few steps back, as if they had seen a ghost. What was going on? The scene in front of them was even more frightening than being beheaded at the Meridian Gate. Qi Juanyu didn't notice it at all. She just continued to kowtow dully like a walking corpse. The flowers are good. The moon is round, melons are plentiful, and the family is happy, long life is safe. Every word that came out of her mouth made people's hearts jump. It was not until Mother Hui and others sobbed and rushed over to hold her while Qi Juanyu scratched her. And then Lord Qi strode over and slapped her on the back of the neck to make her faint that this shocking congratulatory speech came to an end for the time being. But Qi Juanyu, who was still twitching on the bed, clearly told everyone that this might just be the beginning. Chapter 180. Qi Jueyu fainted and Madame Qi also fainted from excessive grief. The servants hurriedly helped Madame Qi back to her room while the servants hurriedly helped her wash up and change into clean clothes before Qi Jueyu woke up. At least she didn't look like a beggar. However, no matter where they went, they all shouted in unison, "Doctor! Go and find the best doctor in the city. As for the Imperial Academy of Medicine, invite the most skilled Imperial Physician Zhu and Imperial Physician Lu over." The entire Marquis Lu Bo's residence was lifeless. 2 maidservants quickly came out of the room with 2 black basins of dirty water. Then they changed the basins and walked back. On the way back they whispered, "Don't you think that 4th young miss looked a bit like an ugly entertainer in a sideshow stall to amuse people? The kind that kneels down and kowtows to ask for money during festivals?" One of the maids secretly nodded. "It's a bit like that." "Ah. Doesn't that mean she's more like the wolf demon? Except that 4th miss can speak and the wolf demon can only write a few words with its claws. Everything else is exactly the same. Could it be that the wolf demon has possessed 4th miss? Oh my god, are we going to suffer together with them? Umitba, don't talk about it, it's too scary, my heart is beating fast. I only hope that every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. Don't implicate innocent people like us. Inside the house, Mother Hui waited for a long time, but the clean water still didn't come. She opened the window and frowned. What are you waiting for? Hurry up. Miss is waiting for water here. The 2 young maidservants hurriedly shut their mouths and quickened their steps as they entered the room. Behind 2 jade-green banana trees, Ning Shu and Zigui listened to this small conversation in silence. It seemed that Qi Jueyu not only had a domineering reputation in the capital, but also in her own residence. Except for Mother Hui, the other maids and servants couldn't wait to stay away from this lousy matter, so as not to be implicated. If she was not mistaken, one of the 2 maidservants they were talking about was Gue Jin, who had followed Qi Juanyu into the palace. How's the investigation of the maids who followed Qi Jueyu into the palace? Apart from Mother Hui, there are 5 other maids. The 4th young miss of the Qi family is a haughty and domineering person. She often beats and scolds the servants. In the past few days, I found out that the 5 servant girls have more or less been punished by her, especially Gue Jin. The rules of the Qi mansion forbade the maids and boys from being intimate with each other. As for Xiang Jin, she was childhood sweethearts with one of the night guards in the mansion. They grew up together and became intimate. When Qi Jueyu found out, he punished Xiang Jin severely and beat up the guard before driving him out of the mansion. Ning Shu nodded silently. No wonder Gue Jin took the initiative to tell her about the wolf demon that day and spread the news of Qi Jueyu's brutality. After hearing this, Ning Shu continued to ask, "What about Mama Hui?" Mother Hui used to be a teaching nanny in the palace. She was released from the palace when she was 30 years old, and had been invited by various noble families to teach the young ladies in their manners. 9 years ago, Qi Jueyu killed the wolf demon on the street, and dragged its corpse through several streets, causing a lot of criticism. Lord Qi was so angry that he invited Mother Hui into the mansion to discipline her. However, Mother Hui is indeed powerful. Since she entered the mansion, Qi Juoyu has indeed restrained himself a lot. How is their relationship? Very good. Most of the time, Mother Hui's words are even more effective than Lady Qi's. After Qi Juoyu went missing, Mother Hui was also very worried and had been praying with Lady Qi. Ningxu calculated in her heart. Mother Hui was released from the palace 20 years ago. At that time, when Kai had just entered the palace as a maid, the two of them brushed past each other and shouldn't have interacted with each other. Has the maid called Gui Jin left the mansion these days? Ningxu thought for a while and asked again. Yes. Zigui nodded. She went out twice. Both times, she secretly went out from the Jiamen in the evening to visit her childhood sweetheart, and secretly came back at night. After Zigui finished speaking, he added, her childhood sweetheart was beaten up that day and became disabled. He can only lie on the bed and wait for people to serve him. He's like a cripple. Chapter 181. She's not poisoned, nor does she seem to have taken any drugs to confuse her mind. Instead, she seems to have been frightened by something so terrible that she can't control her mind now. Several of the most famous doctors in the capital came to the same conclusion after diagnosing Qi Juoyu. Lord Qi's eyes were bloodshot as he asked, "Is there any possibility of my daughter recovering?" The doctor said hesitantly, "It's hard to say. There have been many similar cases, but some people slowly get better after a few years. They regain their sanity and can live a normal life. There are also some people who don't. It depends on their luck." Qi Zhanyu seemed to be disturbed by their voices. She suddenly woke up, and her unfocused eyes glanced around. She immediately screamed and returned to her original cute state. Mother Hui and the others, who had just taken a breath, hurried forward to stop her from hurting herself. But the closer they got, the more frightened Qi Juoyu was. She fell from the bed and crawled under it. She screamed as she crawled. Don't cut my skin. Don't cut my skin. Prince Xiaohou, come and save me. Come and save me. Lord Qi said bitterly. Last year, Huaijin died tragically for no reason. This year, the disaster is transferred to Juoyu. What did my Qi family do? As the suspect who killed Qi Huaijin, Ningxu quickly retracted her neck and quietly walked away from Qi Juoyu's window. When she stepped out of Qi Juoyu's courtyard, she seemed to be able to hear Qi Juoyu's creepy and incomprehensible scream. "Give me back my skin." Tan Siwei was already waiting at the door of the Supreme Court. Ningxu immediately said as soon as she got off the horse, "Sorry to keep you waiting." For convenience, she was wearing men's clothing. The belt that was slightly too wide for her was tightly wrapped around her slender waist. It was so small that it could not be grasped easily. As she leaped down from the horse, it curved like an admirable crescent moon. Tan Siwei blushed when he saw her. He lowered his head and said, "It's my pleasure to be able to solve the case with Lady Ning. I've sent people to bring back the 11 beggars who lived under the bridge where Miss Qi was found. The interrogation has just begun. Lady Ning, please come in." Tan Siwei personally led the way. Ningxu didn't stand on ceremony with him. She put down the horsewhip and followed him inside. "Io, this matter really doesn't have anything to do with us. Who would have thought that, mad? Oh no, this young lady is actually the daughter of the Marquis." In the Supreme Court's prison, 11 unkempt beggars with dirty faces and dirty bodies were crying out in unison in front of the iron bars. Tan Siwei glanced at them and said, "Don't be in such a hurry to cry out your grievances. Since the person was found under your bridge, it must have something to do with you. Don't even think about trying to fish in troubled waters. If you're smart, it's best to tell the truth about everything you know. That way, you might be able to atone for your crimes by performing meritorious deeds. Or, it might be beneficial to the case and you might even get extra rewards. If you're not smart, don't even think about taking a step out of the Supreme Court's prison." Ningxu didn't expect that Tan Xiaoqing's mind would be so clear despite his young appearance. No wonder he was able to sit in the position of Xiaoqing of the Supreme Court in just a few years. It was obvious that he was talented. Tan Siwei's words caused the rowdy beggars to quickly settle down and stop making noise. Ning Shu thanked Tan Siwei and stepped forward to ask, "May I ask, when did the Qi family's fourth young miss appear among you? The first person to answer will be rewarded more." The beggars who were sentenced to prison weren't afraid, but if they answered well, they would be rewarded. Thus, they all cooperated. It was late last night. We were sleeping soundly, and didn't even know what time it was outside. Suddenly, we heard a series of horse hooves approaching in our dreams. We thought it was some family's carriage passing by and didn't think much of it, so we went back to sleep. Not long after, we heard another noise. It sounded like a heavy gunny sack had been thrown in. We were woken up by the noise and opened our eyes in a daze. We found that there really was a gunny sack and there was a living thing moving inside. We woke up in fright and hurriedly got up to see what was going on. Then, we saw a carriage parked not far away. Chapter 182. Who was the one driving the carriage? Do you still remember the appearance or the characteristics of the driver? The breed of the horse, the color, the carvings on the carriage, and other information. As long as you remember, no matter how big or small, tell me everything. Ning Shu thought that the 11 witnesses here would at least give some useful information. Unexpectedly, the 11 of them shook their heads at the same time. We didn't see clearly. There are so many of you. How can you not remember a single one? Ning Shu asked with a frown. The beggars looked at each other guiltily, and then shrank their necks and said, "Because that person threw a bag of broken silver at us. Then we were busy picking up the silver and didn't look carefully. When we finished picking up the silver, the carriage had already run away with the people." Ning Shu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That person could be considered to have a good understanding of human nature. This trick was really good. At the side, the official who participated in the interrogation whipped the beggars and said angrily, "A group of good-for-nothings who only care about money." The beggars dodged and cried, "Let the lords know. We thought that some manner was punishing a disobedient servant or a concubine who made a mistake. When we saw that the person in the bag was crazy, we didn't dare to provoke her. Who would have thought that it was Hofu's daughter? If we knew the truth in advance, even if it was 10,000 taels of gold, we wouldn't dare to pick it up." This kind of meaningless whipping did not have any effect. Ning Shu reached out and stopped them. She thought for a moment and continued to ask, "Where is the cloth bag that contained the fourth daughter of the Qi family now?" A beggar at the side took out the cloth bag from his arms and volunteered, "It's here." Ning Shu took the cloth bag from his hand and carefully looked at it from front to back. Her eyes flashed, and then she used her fingers to pinch a few fine grass pieces from the gap of the cloth. She put it to the tip of her nose and sniffed it. Her eyes looked thoughtful. "Do you remember the direction that the carriage came from?" "I remember that one. It's from the north of the bridge." After Ning Shu asked the last question, she walked out of the prison with Tan Siwei and the others. She put the grass to the tip of her nose and sniffed it a few times. Then she deliberated and said, "Lord Tan, please send your officers and brothers to search the northern part of the city from house to house, with the bridge as the center, to search for cattle, horses, sheep, and other peddlers, or those who sell livestock and fodder. The distance should be within 5 li, at most 10 li. An official from the Supreme Court saw how arbitrary she was and asked suspiciously, "Why is that?" She was a woman, and a woman with a bad reputation at that. So what if she had solved the Phoenix Terrace case? Didn't they all say that she had an expert guiding her from behind? Moreover, the interrogation just now was really nonsense. How did she come to a conclusion? Could it be that she was deliberately mystifying things? Ning Shu was not the least bit annoyed by the questioning gazes around her. She had experienced so many vicious glares and curses that this was nothing to her. Ning Shu curled her lips into a decent smile, and explained in detail in an orderly manner. "There are city patrol officers patrolling the capital every night. If the other party was driving a carriage at night, and was accidentally seen by the city patrol officers, they would definitely be questioned. If I were the other party, I would definitely not take a detour to transport the Qi family's fourth young mistress out of hiding. Instead, I would choose a place that was relatively close or not too far away to abandon her, and leave immediately. This way, I would have the greatest chance of avoiding the city patrol officers. In addition, my daughter's nose is naturally more sensitive. Although these grass have been left here for a long time and have long dried up, there is still a lingering smell. It is very similar to a type of fodder called alfalfa that is used to raise livestock. Therefore, my daughter secretly thought that this cloth bag was undoubtedly used to store fodder. In addition, before I came to the Supreme Court, I saw the chief family's fourth young mistress and smelled an unpleasant smell on her body. Ningshu did not say directly that the smell on Qi Zhuanyu's body was the stench of livestock manure. Chapter 183. After Ningshu finished speaking, the official still didn't seem to believe her on the surface. Ningshu didn't say anything more. Investigating the case was more important, and arguing would only waste time. She secretly sighed in her heart. These people were not as efficient as Xiaoqing's men. Tan Siwei took the few pieces of grass in Ningshu's hand and carefully looked at them. Then, he clapped his hands and praised. Lady Ning is right. I will immediately take people to search from house to house. Thank you, Lord Tan, for your trust. I will rely on you for this matter. After asking Tan Siwei for help again, Ningshu immediately took her leave. Not far away, someone was waiting for her. It was Chun Yang of Chasing Cloud and Moon Chasing Tower. Perhaps she had been waiting for a while. Chun Yang had been tiptoeing around the corner of the Supreme Court's entrance. When she saw Ji Yinshu coming, she immediately waved her hand. Ningshu's eyes lit up. She stepped forward and said, Chun Yang, I asked you to ask your sisters about the matter. Did you find any clues? Chun Yang said, in the past few days I've asked all the sisters I know, and they also asked their own acquaintances. Only then did I get some vague information from one of the sisters. But I don't know if it's useful or not. I wonder if it can help eldest Miss Ning. Ningshu smiled and said, I have troubled you these days. When the case is solved, I will definitely invite you to drink. As for whether it is useful or not, you can tell me. I will judge for myself. Then I will remember. Lady Ning, don't think you can get away with this wine. Chun Yang covered her mouth and laughed with Ji Yinshu. Then she returned to the topic. It's like this. Lin Yang of Chonghua Tower once received a guest. That guest used to come to her every few days. He could be considered her old lover. That guy is called Feng Saner. He used to be a traveling merchant who sold leather goods. He traveled between the western regions and the capital all year round. He had a mouth that could coax people to death. But his appearance was really frightening. There was a big lump on his forehead. Because his appearance was not good, he was always disliked by women. He often went out to sell goods and was not in the capital. He was worried that his wife might not be obedient at home even if he got married. So he has been single for so many years. Every 10 to 15 days he would come to me. Lin Yang of Chonghua Tower cracked a small piece of medicine to add color to the pill, while telling Ningshu what she knew about the past. She was a woman who had long passed her prime, but she was still full of charm. Every move of hers was filled with the charm of a young girl. Ningshu quickly caught on. He used to sell leather goods. Does that mean he changed his profession? Mrs. Smart. Lin Yang's red lips curled up. She looked at Ningshu from head to toe. But before I say anything, I have to make it clear to Mississippi. My relationship with him is just that of a buyer and seller. There is no such thing as a private relationship. No matter what he did, it has nothing to do with me. Ningshu understood her concerns and said, that is natural. Lin Yang put down the medicine and walked to the window to dry it. Then she began to talk. About 10 years ago at that time, this person sold leather goods for a living. He had some money in his hands. But this person was really ugly and liked to abuse women. He would often leave whip marks and blood marks on the women's bodies. No sisters in the tower were willing to accept him as a customer, so the brothel mother forced him to me. At that time, I had just been sold to Chonghua Tower. My father owed a large gambling debt, and I had no choice but to deal with him. Lin Yang stretched out her arm, revealing the old scars on her snow-white arm. Some were deep, some were shallow, some were new, and some were old. Layer upon layer, it was a ghastly sight. Ningxu couldn't help but frown. Chapter 184. Lin Yang rolled down her sleeves and covered up the scars. At first, I hated him very much, but as time passed, I figured out a way to deal with him. Later on, the injuries I suffered gradually lessened. Her voice contained a kind of dull sorrow that made Ningxu's heart ache. Elder sister can embellish it with small petals and pearls to make it look even more special. Ningxu walked over and placed a few pearls next to Lin Yang's hand. Then she said, "If you grind the pearls into powder and mix it with 7 whiteness powder, it'll double the effect of removing scars. Elder sister can give it a try." A beauty past her prime wanted to retain her beauty the most. Lin Yang stared blankly for a moment, then smiled and nodded. "Okay, I'll give it a try tonight." She continued. After interacting with him for another 2 or 3 years, I discovered that he was becoming more and more extravagant. He was much more generous than before when he was selling furs. He didn't even pick up the pieces of silver that fell on the ground. So I asked him what was going on. At that time, he drank some wine and was in a good mood, so he explained to me that he had changed his line of business to selling furs. Although that line of business was profitable, the risks were also high. If he was unlucky enough to encounter bandits along the way, he could still lose money. So he changed his line of business to selling horses. I asked him, "Is there no risk in selling horses? If he encountered bandits, wouldn't he also be unlucky?" He refused to say it clearly, only deliberately mystifying things. Horses are good. Horses are obedient and won't be easily targeted by bandits. Moreover, there'll be someone to take care of them when they arrive, so there's no need to worry about not being able to sell them. If these horses don't listen halfway, they'll be slaughtered and sold for horse meat. In any case, it's just these kinds of repetitive words. I also didn't understand much, so I didn't ask again. Ningxu said, "Then what's the connection between this Feng Santong and the strange rumors of humans turning into monsters?" About 8 or 9 years ago, there was a very popular stall that raised strange beasts in the capital. Every day, they would set up stalls all over the capital to attract customers. One day, they set up a stall in front of our magnificent Splendor building, attracting many people. I also watched from the window upstairs for a long time. I saw the stall owner instructing the strange beasts under his control to kowtow to people and write a few auspicious words. In exchange, he would receive a large sum of money. Every day, he could be considered to be earning a lot of money. I couldn't help but sigh. They both came out to sell their smiles, but why was it so easy to earn money from them? I've been going through hell and back. Feng-san, happened to be next to me that day. He sneered while drinking. His smile was strange and mysterious. I was very curious, so I poured him a lot of wine and asked him if he knew the reason behind it. In a daze he muttered, "This thing is made of flesh and blood. 10 human lives in exchange for 1 spirit. Remember, it's 10. Then he let out a chattering laugh and fell asleep. When he woke up, he refused to say a single word, and even whipped me. 10 human lives in exchange for a spiritual monster? What did that mean? Ningxu thought about it several times in her heart, but she still couldn't understand. She suppressed her curiosity for the time being and continued to ask, "Did Feng-sen look for you recently?" Now that I think about it, he hasn't been here for a while. The last time he came to find me was 2 months ago. Either he went to sell his horse again, or he got tired of me and went to find another woman. Who knows? Lin Yang sneered. If he got tired of me, it's a good thing. But the other girls will have to suffer again. Sister, do you know where Feng-san lives? Let me think. I seem to have heard him mention it before. Ningxu's mouth was sweet. Lin Yang was very happy to hear her calling her sister. She seriously thought about it for her. After a while, she suddenly realized. It seems to be the Drinking Horse Alley. Yes. It's there, in the north of the city, Drinking Horse Alley number 13. I don't know if it's number 15. You can go there and ask. Ningxu stood up. The Drinking Horse Alley in the north of the city happened to be 4 or 5 li away from the bridge where the beggars lived. It was very likely there. Chapter 185. After running around like a headless fly for so many days, Ningshu finally found two threads that were connected together. Ningshu couldn't help but feel a surge of emotions. She solemnly thanked Li Nyang, and immediately ordered someone to invite Tan Siwei, and also sent someone to inform Hui Mo. She had a hunch that Hui Mo would come in handy. Wow, what's this smell? As soon as they walked into Inma Alley, a group of people was staggered by the strong pungent smell. Hui Mo covered his mouth and nose and curiously stood at the entrance of the alley to look inside. It was difficult to describe what kind of smell it was. It was fishy, stinky, greasy, and rotten. It was as if every piece of mud in the alley was soaked in this complex smell. It was much more layered than the smell of corpses in the mass grave. It aroused Hui Mo's great interest. Compared to talking and asking about longevity locks from house to house, it was much more interesting to do an autopsy. This alley is located in the north of the city and is relatively remote. Most of the people living here are butchers who slaughter pigs and sheep. In other places, they may be looked down upon. Only here, no one despised each other. So slowly, more and more people came to live here. Let's walk inside and find someone to ask. Ningshu neatly stepped down from the horse. Okay. The deeper they went, the stronger the smell was. The officials of the Supreme Court could not help but cover their mouths and noses. They stood at the entrance of the alley and reluctantly walked inside. But they saw Lady Ning did not blink. She held the hem of her robe and walked into the alley without any hesitation. While walking, she sniffed the disgusting air, as if she was trying to distinguish something. The officials thought, "She is indeed the first female general of Great Yu. She is indeed extraordinary. She is so scary." Tan Siwei clumsily climbed down from the horse and quickly followed Ningshu's footsteps. He walked in front of her and Hui Mo. He knocked on the door of a house and asked. Soon he found out that Feng San lived in the deepest part of the alley, number 15. The officials of the Supreme Court had a trap and trotted to the door before Tan Siwei. "Is there anyone in? The government is handling a case." There was no response. "Stop knocking, it won't open." Ningshu's nose twitched, and her face tightened. Under everyone's surprised gaze, she whispered, "I smell the stench of a corpse." The door was kicked open by Hui Mo with a loud bang, and the door squeaked in pain. Logically speaking, even if the people present hadn't personally solved a case, it was common to see corpses. But this time, they were still shocked by the scene in front of them. A timid official collapsed on the ground and pointed at the bloody thing in the courtyard and shouted, "Wolf, wolf demon! This was a wolf demon. There really is a wolf demon. Because that thing clearly looked like a human. It had a head, for limbs, arms, and thighs. It was about the same length as an ordinary person, but its entire body was covered in black wolf fur. Every tip of the fur was stained with black dried blood. The crowd had long heard of the rumors of the wolf demon. When they saw the scene in front of them, they instinctively took a few steps back, wishing that they could escape immediately. So this case has been solved. The legendary wolf demon that pestered the fourth Miss of Qi for revenge and made her disappear and go crazy really exists. Even Ningshu couldn't help but shrink her pupils when she saw the horrible scene in front of her. But she quickly calmed down and called Hui Mo. Hui Mo immediately took out 2 pairs of pig-soaked gloves and handed them to Ningshu. Then the two squatted in front of the strange corpse in front of everyone's eyes. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.